that members and public attendees this evening are aware. It is our intention to record this evening's meeting on a trial basis with the intention of starting live broadcasting from December meeting of Council, given that the September meeting will be held in Cleethorpes Town Hall. I've got one or two announcements. First of all, just to let all members know that Councillor Haggis is not feeling very well tonight, so she may have to leave, she may do, but I hope you're okay, Councillor Haggis. The next thing I'd like to say is thank you very much to all members for the offers of support about my wife just recently and all the kind words. My wife is not doing too bad, but I know I'm on a difficult journey. Cones Winter, last weekend, it was a marvellous event, and I'm pleased to see a question on the order paper tonight from one of the new councillors, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops. It was an amazing event, and I think Councillor Jackson would have liked it, the event what I went to at Cleethorpes Light Railway, when we had to go on the railway as such. I love railways, so it was an amazing day it was. Don't forget, members, to get your money out. Next weekend, I'm taking part in a 24-hour sponsored walk around Grantford Park. I think I'll be doing a few laps at the very least, I will do, but hopefully I'll be walking the full 24 hours. Few breaks though, I'll have one break every hour, I will do. Well, we're on the money. Tomorrow morning, just to let you know, cakes are back. Sandy is making the cakes for tomorrow. I know she's got many cakes already made. Please come along. Tickets are only £3 at 10 o'clock. Have an enjoyable and refreshing morning. And finally, I just want to say one thing about this year's Civic Awards when it comes round. I've introduced an award for foster carers. I have, and I think that is something which is definitely needed because foster carers are absolutely marvellous. They do a grand job, and that will hopefully very much appreciated. But thank you very much, members, on that. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence from this meeting tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from councillors Cairns, Cracknell, Lindley and Mickleborough.
Thank you very much. Item 3. I now move the minutes of the meetings of North East Lincolnshire Council held on the 14th of March 2024, the Mayor Making meeting of North East Lincolnshire Council held on the 15th of May 2024, and the annual meeting of North East Lincolnshire Council held on the 23rd of May. Do I have a seconder? May I remind members that comments on these minutes should be restricted to matters of accuracy. There will be no questions allowed. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members in any item on the agenda for this meeting? I would now like to, are there any members? Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a stand up. Sorry. Mr. Mayor, I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest in item 7, the petition, as it affects potentially my employer, East Marsh United, a local housing provider. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wilson should be declaring an interest on item 7 as he is a landlord within the East Marsh.
Mr. Mayor, I am not a landlord on East Marsh at all.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. If you look at Councillor Wilson's register of interests, he has 17 Fraser Street as a property he owns, which comes into the East Marsh in my ward.
Councillor, it's an individual matter for individual members to declare their own interests. Thank you.
I would now like to bring forward item 6 on the agenda, question time. As the council has received 2 questions from a member of the public for this evening's meeting. Please can I remind the member of the public to present the question as submitted. The first question has been received from Mr. Dicker, who is in attendance this evening. Welcome, Mr. Dicker. Would you like to put your first question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First question is, why did I receive the answer that I've received from the legal officer that the then Assistant Director, for clarity, of Children's Services did not need to answer my question despite no obvious legal restriction at the special scrutiny meeting convened on the 27th of September 2023? It took the independent report to answer one of the questions posed, and that was the 1.5 million that was cited was, in essence, a made-up figure and reinforced my request at the time for all of us to be given their crystal ball.
Councillor Jackson, in the absence of the portfolio for children and education, please will you respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. Good evening, Mr. Dicker, and thank you for your question. The minutes of that particular scrutiny panel meeting of the 27th of September do actually confirm that Mr. Dicker was able to address the scrutiny panel. The council has a constitutional route for the public to ask questions at any scrutiny panel meeting. They must be submitted no later than 5 working days before the date of the meeting, and such questions are to the scrutiny panel members, not the officers that support the panel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I respond to that or ask a question? Yeah, okay. The report also recommends that the council should review their constitution. The public was prevented from posing 2 stingy questions that the officers failed to answer at scrutiny, and there is still no function for any questions to be asked at cabinet level. It is no wonder when I was asked why I was helping, because the council will only do what they want. What will the leader of the council do to rectify this gross restriction of democracy that could have raised alarm bells sooner than what the Scaffold public meeting were done?
Councillor Jackson, will you please respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dicker, for your second question. Mr. Dicker is well aware of the process, having submitted questions at the earlier panel meeting of the 21st of September, as confirmed by those minutes. Whilst we do not have a constitutional platform for public questions to Cabinet, we encourage public participation in local decision making in a number of ways, which I will outline. All meetings are open and transparent and conducted in public, save where specific items of business fall into the statutory definition of exempt business. All reports and papers are published on the council website well in advance of meetings. The public are able to submit questions to full council in accordance with the question time procedure, as indeed Mr. Dicker has done tonight. The public are able to compile petitions in accordance with the petition scheme. The public are able to submit questions to any scrutiny panel. The public are able to speak at regulatory committees, for example, the planning committee. Public are given notice of pending key decisions via the published forward plan, and the public are able to see reports and decision notices made by council and cabinet. The public are able to write to their ward councillors or directly to members of the cabinet to seek information, which Mr. Dicker has done to me on a number of occasions. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the review of the Constitution mentioned in the nurseries report is around public questions or speaking rights at meetings. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson, and thank you, Mr. Dicker, for your questions. I will arrange for a written confirmation of the answers to your questions to be sent to you. Agenda item 5, the leader's statement. Councillor Jackson, will you please give your leader's statement, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It won't have escaped your notice that we've had no less than 2 elections since my last leader's statement in March. Indeed, between us in this council chamber, I'm sure we have worn out a lot of shoe leather during that time. Mr. Mayor, starting with the most recent first, congratulations to Melanie On and Martin Vickers on their respective victories in the Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes and Brigg and Immingham seats. I look forward to working with both of them in the best interests of North East Lincolnshire. Mr. Mayor, I hope we can enjoy the same fruitful working arrangements with the new government as we have had in recent years with the previous Conservative administration. It's very important that we continue to build on well-established working relationships with key departments of state, including the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. There is no doubt that Grimsby, in particular, will remain in the spotlight, and that means we must continue to maintain our balanced focus on working with our partners to create the conditions for our place to grow, thrive and prosper, and engaging on a regional and national basis to support that ambition. The challenges faced by local government up and down the country are the same as they were before the 4th of July. I hope the new government will give them early attention. The local government financial model is in need of review. There are major challenges for the sector across demand-led services, including children's, adults and SEND. Local government needs to be engaged with and listened to in terms of the scale and depth of the challenges across complexity of need, workforce, funding and market shaping. Our job would be easier if we enjoyed longer term certainty of funding to aid resource planning generally, for example, multi-year settlements. Mr. Mayor, the new government has placed housing at the forefront of its agenda, both in terms of meeting unmet demand and stimulating economic growth. With an aspiration of 1.5 million new homes in its first term, we are told that local authorities will have delivery targets. We have yet to see what the implications of that will be for North East Lincolnshire. The relaxation of the planning regime has already been signalled with policy changes, for example, onshore wind, and again, the aim is to support and enable growth faster and more nimbly. There could be significant implications for North East Lincolnshire as we continue with the review of our current local development plan. Watch this space. Mr. Mayor, in the second day of his new job, Sir Keir Starmer met all Metro mayors at Downing Street, expressing his enthusiasm for further devolution. Council leaders in areas not currently covered by a devolution deal have this week been written to by the Deputy Prime Minister offering a devolution conversation. We have our own oven-ready deal. We received formal confirmation before the election from DLUC that the consultation had passed the necessary statutory tests and the draft legislation is ready to be laid before Parliament. Let's get on with it so that we can start to enjoy the benefits across Greater Lincolnshire in tandem with a similar deal on the north bank of the Humber. This real opportunity to take the region forward can't be lost now, and North East Lincolnshire stands ready to play its part for the benefit of our residents, communities and businesses. Mr. Mayor, turning now to the local election outcome. Though we are now a minority administration, this Conservative administration intends to stick with its ambitious plans for growth and change across North East Lincolnshire. That's the only way we can move our borough forward and address some of the serious inequalities we know we have, as well as overhauling skills provision to help local people take advantage of the new, better paid jobs that are being created across all our key employment sectors. We must ensure we have the right housing and infrastructure in place for our current residents, as well as those who want to move into the area. We want workers and their families to live in North East Lincolnshire, keeping a North East Lincolnshire pound in North East Lincolnshire, rather than commuting in and spending their income outside the borough. That's why it's also essential to make our place more attractive to live and visit. The regeneration schemes that are being delivered based on the Grimsby and Cleethorpes master plans, the grant funding they have attracted in recent years, and the greater private sector confidence and investment that brings are key to that ambition. We particularly want North East Lincolnshire to be a place where young people can thrive and prosper with good jobs and careers and an environment that encourages them to stay. Mr. Mayor, I hope all parties in this chamber can unite around those aims and objectives. Focusing for a minute on Cleethorpes, Mr. Mayor, yesterday Cabinet approved the final concept designs for the regeneration of Marketplace and the refurbishment of Pier Gardens. These two exciting schemes are being funded from the £18.4 million of Levelling Up funding, won for the resort, and have been designed following extensive public engagement, including via the Cleethorpes master plan process, detailed consultation with local businesses, and very helpful input from the relevant scrutiny panel. Also, Mr. Mayor, work has now commenced on site on the third Cleethorpes Levelling Up Fund project, the new iconic building on Sea Road. Mr. Mayor, events are vital to the resort, and the biggest of those has to be Armed Forces Weekend, the last weekend in June. Particular thanks go to the Armed Forces Major Events team for a superbly organised event, but thanks to everyone else involved, not least to our brilliant council teams who cleared the waste generated by those thousands of visitors and ensured the resort was spick and span again by the Monday morning. Mr. Mayor, Grimsby Town Centre also enjoyed a very successful event in June, albeit not quite on the scale of Armed Forces Weekend, the Festival of the Sea. This is now well established in Grimsby's events programme and brought many families into the town centre for a great day out. Mr. Mayor, turning now to public transport, not something I often mention in my leader speech, but there have been a number of different developments which I think are worth mentioning. We have been successful in securing significant grant funding for our bus service improvement plan and are, in partnership with Stagecoach East Midlands, introducing and maintaining significant improvements to local bus services. These include introducing a new route, as well as extending others and increasing some frequencies. We have been able to reintroduce free travel before 9:30 AM for concessionary bus pass holders and also maintain the travel anywhere £1 fare at weekends and in the evenings. This is all great news for existing bus users, but is also encouraging new passengers, saving them money, reducing congestion and helping the environment. Finally, Mr. Mayor, the current council tracking of actions document has been circulated. There have been no special urgency decisions taken since the March meeting of council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Agenda item 7, petition for debate, East Marsh housing reform.
I raise a point of order, Mr. Mayor. If we accept this petition as it's laid out, doing the entirety of the East Marsh, I believe that's illegal. and that'll be an illegal act if we actually do that. So I just want to rule in that we're not actually going to do that and put this council in a position where we're acting unlawfully.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm not sure which regulation you're referring to, but certainly us merely receiving a petition of this nature is a lawful act. I accept that there may be some restrictions around geographies of selective licensing areas, but we're not at that stage yet.
Cool. A petition for debate has been received requesting that the council take immediate action to improve housing standards and promote community well-being in the East Marsh by launching the process of selective licensing across the entirety of the East Marsh with the aim to implement with immediate effect. Additionally, the petition urges the council to establish an Article 4 direction on Wellington Street. Councillor Aisthorpe, please will you present the petition?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand before you today on behalf of residents from the East Marsh Involved Community Group who started this petition and the hundreds of residents who have signed it, calling for immediate implementation of selective licensing across the whole of the East Marsh and an Article 4 direction on Wellington Street. Mr. Mayor, most properties in the East Marsh are rented accommodations and they are often left unmanaged and unchecked. As a result, our community is suffering from absentee landlords. Properties that should be homes, places of comfort and safety have instead become sources of distress and unsafe living conditions. While we do have some excellent landlords in East Marsh who deserve recognition and support, they are unfortunately in the minority. We are seeing uncontrolled fly tipping in our alleyways, causing health and safety issues. Waste bins clutter our streets simply because many tenants cannot access their back gardens. My colleagues and I have received countless reports of landlords disregarding cleanliness, failing to keep alleyways clear, and even dumping waste themselves to make room for new tenants. Mr. Mayor, many rented properties in the East Marsh are neglected, with issues like dampness, black mould, faulty electrics, and no heating during winter. We are also alarmed by the rise of drug dens, as frequently reported in the local news and often popping up within our neighbourhoods. These problems not only harm the reputation of our community, but also compromise the quality of our residents' daily lives. Mr. Mayor, at the heart of these problems is a common issue: landlords who fail to regularly check and maintain their land and properties. Mr. Mayor, it is clear that without direct intervention, these problems will persist and potentially worsen. This is where selective licensing comes in. By introducing a system where landlords must obtain a license to rent out their properties, we as a council can establish a higher standard of accountability and responsibility. Selective licensing would require landlords to meet certain conditions, such as ensuring their properties are well maintained, secure and managed in a way that reduces the likelihood of fly tipping, illegal activities, and tenants would feel more safe in their homes. Mr. Mayor, since starting this campaign, my ward colleagues and I have been inundated with messages from local people. One person said, "I no longer live in the East Marsh, but I still have nightmares from the rented accommodation there." Another resident said, "I still live in the East Marsh and I couldn't be happier with my new landlord, but I've supported this petition because of my last landlord in the area who served me a Section 21 eviction notice for simply asking for repairs as agreed in my contract." These real life experiences are just some examples that highlight the need for action. We are not here to vilify all landlords, but to address those who fail their responsibilities. Notably, Mr Mayor, several of our responsible landlords in the East Marsh have signed this petition calling for selective licensing. We even have an architect with developments in the ward, along with homeowners and tenants who, despite having no issues with their landlords, still recognise the broader community's struggle with rogue landlords and have also signed this petition. Mr Mayor, we are also calling for an Article 4 direction regulation on Wellington Street. This street has a wonderful community where neighbours look out for one another, but they have suffered from inadequate, overcrowded houses of multiple occupations that often result in police investigations. Residents on Wellington Street face a real threat of out-of-town developers taking advantage of more empty properties on the street, exasperating a problem that already exists. An Article 4 direction would help safeguard that community from any further unsuitable developments going forward. Mr Mayor, with this petition, we seek to create a community where everyone can feel safe, secure, and proud of their homes and street environments. Of course, these changes in policy are not a measure that will solve all our problems overnight, but it is a significant step in the right direction. It sends a clear message that we will not tolerate that we will not tolerate neglect, and that we are committed to building a better future for all residents in the East Marsh. Therefore, Mr Mayor, I move a motion for this council to implement selective licensing across the whole of the East Marsh and an Article 4 direction regulation on Wellington Street, as stated in this petition and endorsed by hundreds of residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Acethorpe. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to second this motion and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Any members wishing to speak? Councillor Wheatley.
Let's try this newfangled device. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to be happy to receive the petition, but also to raise concerns around some of the wording and also the parochial nature of the petition and its failure to completely understand that East Marsh does not sit alone as an island in the sea that is North East Lincolnshire. Whilst I understand that the Lib Dems seemingly have an interest only in East Marsh, may I remind them that the rest of the borough actually does exist. And to single out East Marsh for immediate action ignores the other wards that will immediately be affected by an adoption of selected licensing only in that one area. The initial consultation on selective licensing from 2019 was clear that the selective licensing was to be considered for implementation across areas of both East and West Marsh, and this was halted by the COVID pandemic. It is therefore disappointing that this has been brought forward as a petition to implement in only one area, rather than look at a holistic approach to the borough-wide issues around selective licensing of private landlords and HMOs. If it had been brought as a borough-wide petition, we would have been far more supportive and would have welcomed the intervention. I would therefore hope that any potential actions that have been moved that would then come from this petition could incorporate the identified hotspots across all wards in North East Links rather than just East Marsh. The government guidance shows that currently local authorities have the powers to introduce selective licensing of privately rented homes in order to tackle the problems in their areas, or any parts of them caused by low housing demand, a significant and persistent problem caused by antisocial behaviour, poor housing conditions, high levels of migration, high levels of deprivation, high levels of crime. I can, Mr Mayor, think of several of our wards that could possibly meet those criteria, and yet the petition and petitioners can't see past the end of their noses to consider the whole of the borough. We must also consider the consequences of such a limited remit of selective licensing on the other areas of the town, where the less scrupulous landlords may well decamp to avoid licensing their properties within the boundaries of East Marsh. We have looked at displacement as part of parking reviews, but this could also form part of the consequences of selective licensing, only being considered for a single ward, rather than a more sensible and pragmatic approach of looking at the criteria and applying them across the borough to hotspots where this approach would be the most effective, rather than the parochial and short-sighted approach being taken by the petitioners on this occasion. I do hope, Mr Mayor, that whilst we are in favour of selective licensing and support the principles as laid out in the petition, we don't start forming enclaves within our borough and work collectively to apply the guidance criteria across the board in hotspots in all wards, not just in East Marsh. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope that we might be able to meet the concerns or address the concerns of both Councillor Aisthorpe and Councillor Wheatley. As members will know, the Cabinet did adopt a housing strategy earlier on this year, and part of that housing strategy was an undertaking to start the process of further investigating the introduction of selective licensing, and it didn't talk about any particular part of the borough for that. And officers have now started taking us down that route in terms of gathering the necessary evidence and information that we need to be able to run that process. This is quite a lengthy legal process that the authority has to go through to be able to introduce selective licensing. And one of the main reasons that the Cabinet Working Group on housing issues was established at the Council AGM was to look at selective licensing and try and make early progress with that. So we have now got the first meeting in the diary of the Cabinet Working Group on selective licensing and other housing issues. And I hope that we'll be able to make early progress with going down the road of the necessary legal steps that we need to, at least to be able to have an experimental area of the borough where we look at imposing selective licensing to see how it works within the context of North East Lincolnshire. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Stuart Swinburne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the leader's more or less stolen my thunder there and quite a bit of it, but I think it's quite right that he does say there about how the housing strategy was set up by the Cabinet in the last financial year. But I can assure Councillor Aisthorpe and I can assure the rest of this council that we do take these issues very seriously, and I'm sure that we will review and address the application of selective licensing and Article 4 directions, not just within the East Marsh, but as Councillor Wheatley says, should be across the borough. North East Lincolnshire housing strategy was approved, as it was mentioned there, so we will get on with that, but the Cabinet is committed to reviewing both selective licensing and HMO usage, and as such has commissioned a cross-party Cabinet Working Party for that specific reason. Therefore, Mr Mayor, I would recommend that we receive this petition and refer it back to the Cabinet Working Group, and as portfolio holder, I will defer to the Cabinet Working Party and ask them to add the points that you're making in the scope for the review process, and a report and plan of action will be published following the completion of this working party. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, as a leader alludes to, this is quite a complex process. This is not something that can be put in place overnight, and I've been looking through all the government guidance. Not only that, but North Lincolnshire Council is just going through this themselves. Two separate areas of Scunthorpe are both having selective licensing, and from start to finish, from when they first set out on the journey to when it's going to be finally implemented, looks as though it will take about 18 months. So it's not a quick process by any means. And the government guidance is detailed. So, for example, it should be noted that in making a selective licensing designation, the local housing authority must also take other measures to help address the problems. A scheme cannot be proposed unless those other measures are to be introduced. So there's a wider context to this, which is going to take quite a lot of work, involved work, to get this off the ground and moving forward. But I do support the principle of selective licensing. The only sort of perhaps thing at the back of my mind is sometimes it's very easy. We go down a particular route and sometimes we forget the laws of unintended consequences. So, there will be a lot of pros for this, but there may also be some downsides that we need to consider as well. Increased cost, movement of a problem to another area, withdrawal of landlords as well, which may exacerbate the shortage of housing. So there's a lot to be considered here, but I support the principle. The only thing I would say finally is for the Article 4 direction, it would just have been helpful to understand what permitted development rights that was looking to address.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Any further members wishing to speak? Councillor Aysthorpe, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I remind councillors that I am an East Marsh Ward councillor and I am acting on behalf of my residents' requests. Councillor Wheatley surely doesn't expect me and my colleagues to go into her ward and petition there as well. That is your duty and what you should do for your residents. But I do take into consideration that it is not just our ward that face these issues. There are other wards as well. And I agree with the comments that have been said and thank members for their support with this petition. And I accept the suggestion of the Cabinet Working Group reviewing this and other wards as well. But I do hope that the working group meets as a matter of urgency because the matter does need addressing now. Thank you.
I will now take.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Members, as a matter of form, all this chamber can do is support the principle of selected licensing and Article 4 directions. That's what I've heard tonight. I've also heard from the relevant portfolio holder that he's minded to refer this of his own volition to the Cabinet Working Party, which in turn will bring back recommendations to Cabinet in the fullness of time. Councillor Aysthorpe, are you satisfied with that route? I'm obliged. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I will now take a vote on this motion proposed by Councillor Aysthorpe. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 8. Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report 2023-2024. To receive a report detailing the activities of the Audit and Governance Committee during the council year and setting out how it's discharged its responsibilities. This report was referred to the council by the Audit and Governance Committee at its meeting on the 18th of April 2024. The chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, Mr. Render, is in virtual attendance this evening, and I would like to welcome him to this meeting. I have invited Mr. Render to introduce his report to members, and I now move the suspension of standing orders for this purpose. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour, please show. Mr. Render, would you like to address council? A reminder that you have 10 minutes to speak, and I will let you know if you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you again for this opportunity to present to council the annual report of the committee. I usually start my report by stressing how important it is that the council has assurance that it's properly controlling what it does, especially at times. This year is no obtaining, giving assurances that our committee does.
Tim, sorry to interrupt. You might want to take your camera off because the audio is not so good in the chamber, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Obtaining and giving assurance is the bread and butter of audit and the work our committee does. I don't think any of us would deny that the environment in which the council operates continues to pose challenges. There are also significant opportunities, especially for investment in the future of the borough. The context to what we do is that the council is a big business and a complex, but it is also not standard with major change and progress to the way key services live. We have increased of changes and their impact over the past. We've not neglected our key purposes.
Tim, can you just wait a minute, please? Are members really struggling? Because I am. I think we're all nodding here. I wonder if it's best to hand over to Councillor Holland to deliver the speech on his behalf. Do you mind that, Tim?
That's very helpful, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where we got up to, I have to say.
Let's start afresh, Councillor Holland.
Okay. So on behalf of Mr. Render, thank you again for an opportunity to present to Council the annual report of the Audit and Governance Committee. I usually start my report by stressing how important it is that the Council has assurance that it's properly controlling what it does, especially at times of change. This year is no exception. Obtaining and giving assurance is the bread and butter of audit and the work our committee does. I don't think any of us would deny that the environment in which the Council operates continues to pose challenges, but there are also significant opportunities, especially for investment in the future of the borough, where we need to ensure that there are appropriate governance and control arrangements in place. The context to what we do is that the Council is big business and a complex one at that. Turnover of £350 million a year, assets of £420 million, borrowings of £170 million. But it is also one that does not stand still, with major changes planned in progress to the way key services are delivered, such as highways, adult social care and children's services. We have increased our oversight of these changes and their impact on governance over the past year. But we have not neglected our key purposes as a committee to ensure that the rules you set are followed, that the Council is protecting public assets and has effective arrangements for managing resources and securing value for money. Members of the committee may feel that I sound like a broken record when I emphasise the two key roles of the committee. Firstly, to ensure that we have an effective system of internal control, not just for resources, but also for delivering Council objectives. And secondly, to make sure that system is working. These are the key things we need to do. We have to give you assurance that you have sound arrangements for managing risk and controlling what the organisation does. The report you have today covers these issues for the last municipal year. I am pleased to say that again, we can give you assurance about those arrangements. That conclusion follows the work we have reviewed from internal and external audit, the specific exercises we have carried out in looking at Treasury management, the Council's accounts, and our work monitoring and reviewing the governance of the Council's partnerships and major areas of change. We spent a considerable amount of time getting upstream of the changes that impact on the Council's governance, and especially adult social care, with the new arrangements for working with health and the Integrated Care Board, children's services, with the continued involvement of the Commissioner and the Improvement Programme, and the planned changes for services delivered currently by Equans. For the last municipal year, we published our work programme in April 2023 to focus on these emerging issues as well as day-to-day business. We again shared the work programme with scrutiny members to ensure that our respective work is complementary and adds to the effective functioning of the authority. We are publishing our work programme for the current municipal year next week, and we'll be sharing that widely too. Following best practice in audit, we assessed ourselves against the standards of effectiveness expected for audit committees. This year, we followed the revised process published by CIPFA in 2022. Our assessment is essentially that we are effective, but we recognise that there are areas of our work where we may not demonstrate all the elements of good practice for committees. The result of the assessment is included in our annual report. There are two areas for development that we are working on. Firstly, making sure that all committee members have the skills and knowledge needed for the rather specialised role of audit. So we have a training programme and try to ensure the continuity of membership. Secondly, we aim to enhance the independence of our work, particularly through the appointment of a second independent member of the committee, which is recognised as good practice. This is before full council this evening. Last year also saw the periodic independent audit of the council's own internal audit system. In the rather unhelpful terminology of this process, internal audit was judged to generally conform to the requirements of the standards. I say unhelpful as this rating is the highest that can be achieved under the system, and so gives us assurance about the quality and performance of internal audit. A number of areas for management action will be reviewed at the next audit committee. We followed our usual calendar of approving an internal audit programme and considering the findings of audits, closely monitoring the council's arrangements for managing risk and approving the accounts for 22-23. I'm pleased to report that the statutory audits for 21-22 and 22-23 have now been completed by external audit. Delays in sign-off have been extremely frustrating for both officers and the auditors, being caused by national technical issues, and do not reflect in any way on the performance of the council's finance team. North East Lincolnshire is one of only a handful of councils to have all previous years' accounts signed off in this way. However, the external auditor continues to include in his value for money judgment the weaknesses reported in the Ofsted inspection of children's services from November 2021, and therefore qualified his opinion on the value for money delivered by the council. Although there has been much progress on the improvement journey since the Ofsted report, the situation is such that the value for money judgment for 23-24 is again likely to be qualified. The committee, sitting as the audit working group, devoted a whole meeting to reviewing with the Director of Children's Services the governance arrangements within and for children's services. This is an area whose control arrangements we will continue to keep a close eye on as part of our role. We have continued to review various partnerships, notably that with health. We received reports from the Director of Adult Services on how the Council / NHS changes have been implemented and developed. This remains important to ensure that the Council's interests are properly protected and that the gains made locally over the past decade from the and adult social care for the people of the borough are sustained and built on as we move forward. We again looked at the Council's process for financial planning. Like most authorities, we continue to face significant financial issues. We were assured that there is a robust process in place, but will again review the internal controls and processes designed to deliver the plan and finance strategy later this year. As part of our role in partnership governance, we took a detailed look at the process for bringing the services provided through ECVANS back in-house. The committee considered this a well thought out plan and governance process, but we'll come back to it to review progress in the autumn. In conclusion, I would like to thank various officers and their staff for the support they give to our work and the contributions to our agenda. In particular, I would like to thank the Head of Internal Audit and Assurance, the Executive Director of Environment, Economy and Resources, the Assistant Director of Finance, the Assistant Director for Governance, Assurance and Assets, and of course the committee team for all their help and support to both me and the committee over the past year. I am, as ever, grateful to members of the committee who continue to develop the audit function with enthusiasm and growing knowledge of the key issues. It is good to see continuity in the membership of the committee, as that is so important to the specialised role that the audit committee has. I hope you find our report helpful and it gives you the assurance you need. I commend it to the council. Mr. Tim Render.
Thank you for delivering that speech on behalf of Mr. Render, Councillor Holland. Councillor Holland, will you move the recommendations as set out in the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Audit and Governance Committee, I would like to thank Mr. Render for his detailed report and thank him for his diligent work and expert guidance to the committee over the previous municipal year. And I would like to propose that the annual report for 2023-2024 be approved.
Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second that. Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Any members wishing to speak on the matter? No members, so we put that to the vote. All those in favour? Very much, members. Agenda item 9, appointment of second independent audit and governance committee member. To consider a report on the appointment of a second independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee. Councillor Holland, will you move the recommendations?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All members received yesterday the report of the monitoring officer with respect to the appointment of a second independent member to the Audit and Governance Committee. The report is self-explanatory, I think, and on that basis, I propose, as Deputy Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, that Council approves the 3 recommendations listed.
Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second that, Mr. Mayor.
I will now take a vote on this matter. Or does anybody want to speak first? No? I'll now take a vote on this matter. All those in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 10, ward boundary review. Consider report seeking approval of North East Lincolnshire Council's council size submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members will know, this is the next step in this authority's process around the review of the local government boundaries within North East Lincolnshire. The last time that was done was in 2000, the year 2000, so 24 years ago. And for the benefit of new members, we're obviously intending to have this completed by the next set of North East Lincolnshire Council elections, which will be in May 2026. So at an earlier meeting, this council had already agreed that we wanted to maintain the arrangement of having elections in thirds, as opposed to having all-out elections, which therefore means, under the current regulations, that we have to have 3 councillors per ward. And obviously we can't go to the next step of deciding how many wards we're going to have and what the boundaries might be until we have decided how many councillors that we think we will need going forward from 2026 onwards. And so this was the first job of the new ward boundary review working group. I'd like to thank the members of that working group for spending a lot of time looking at the evidence which is set out in the council size submission template. And of course, there was also a survey of elected members to get their views, and that covered a whole range of different issues about the roles of local authority members and the amount of time it takes, for example, for them to discharge their roles. The result of all that was that the Ward Boundary Review Working Group is recommending that we maintain the existing number of councillors that we currently have on the authority, that is 42, and that's a number that's set out in the template and the recommendation that we will be making to the Boundary Commission should that be approved tonight. So I'm happy to move, Mr. Mayor, the recommendations from the Ward Boundary Review Working Group that we retain a council of 42 members going forward.
Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second.
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak on this matter? Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Blimey, my throat's going again. Something about this council chamber does my throat in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This review of the local ward boundaries, Councillor Jackson is quite right, is the first full review in over 20 years. And so what we decide will have an impact upon the representation for residents and our communities within this chamber, taking us potentially to the middle of the century. The report as laid out indicates that the recommendation is for the council size to remain at 42. We are not minded to support this recommendation. The criteria of evidence-based reasoning, as requested by the Boundary Commission, hasn't been followed or met. These periodic reviews are important to us who sit in this chamber, but in the scheme of things, we'll come pretty far down on the list of priorities of our residents. In fact, I would suspect that most people within this borough don't know how many councillors there actually are. And if they do, they think there are too many of us. If we're good at our jobs, our residents will know who their local representatives are and what we do within our communities. And if we're not, then we'll be found out at the ballot box. As a council, we agreed to continue to elect councillors by thirds, which I and the Labour group agreed with. However, this report recommending a further maintenance of the status quo is not necessarily the right way forward. What suited us and the residents 20 years ago does not reflect the needs and requirements of our communities now. It does not mean change for change's sake either. One of the few members in this chamber who was here for the last boundary review want to reflect upon some of the changes from then to now. I was initially elected in 1999 when we had no email, no laptops, no Teams messages. Mobile phones were just that, phones. Nothing smart about them then. We received correspondence as councillors through the post or in green bags a couple of times a week, delivered in a van. We sat on operational management committees rather than scrutiny panels. Whilst I don't want this to become a meander through the good old days, because actually some of them weren't, it's important to reflect that the advancement of technology and the change to the leader cabinet scrutiny style of governance arrangements has meant that the number of councillors needed then is not necessarily needed now. In fact, it says in the report that the portal is to encourage members of the public to engage directly with the services rather than to rely upon councillors to log calls on their behalf. It is likely that workload will reduce, although I do acknowledge that much of the cases we get now are far more complex. A slight reduction within the number of councillors to 39 would look like a sensible option for the next generation of councillors. We are a small unitary authority with only a very limited projected growth in population. In fact, as our population has declined in recent years, I would question the assessed potential for the growth. But that's a different debate. Within this review, we have an opportunity to create wards that really represent our communities within our borough. It is not just a slight overhaul of a few lines on the map to address the number imbalances, but it is very clear from the initial meetings with the commissioners that they expect us to provide clear evidence for why we want to do something or why we don't. The option of 39 councillors would give us 13 wards, with the number of residents represented by each councillor is 3,125, a slight increase, which is still significantly less than some of our statistical neighbours, including North Links, whose review has already concluded, and would give a saving of approximately £100,000 over the 4-year period of a council administration. Whilst the report does consider a possible reduction, I don't think that the reasons not to consider it reasonable. For example, it states that reducing the number could potentially mean that the governance and committee structure would need to be reviewed and amended, and the council doesn't see any justification for doing that, but it doesn't say why not. Where's the evidence to back that up? One of the reasons given for retaining the 42 is that members would continue to serve on the same number of committees that they currently do. This is inaccurate, as although political balance is in place, this differs year on year. And as for statement that a reduction could have an impact upon the diversity of councillors, good, because looking around this chamber, the more white and predominantly middle-aged bunch of people I've yet to see. Taking this into account, the report presented tonight does not give the clear evidence-based reasons as to why the number of councillors should remain at 42, other than it being, according to Douglas Adams, the answer to the answer to the question of life, the universe and everything. So goodbye and thanks for all the fish.
Councillor Holland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually take an opposite view, which may not be go down that well with the public, but I actually look at the hours and how many hours is a councillor expected to put in during a normal week. And we saw that the National Census of Local Authority Councils indicated that unitary authority councillors spend, that's us, on average 25.6 hours per week on council business, plus over 5 hours per week on party group business, resulting 30+ hours per week. Now, I don't think there was anything in the survey that we conducted that actually contradicts those numbers. So even if we discount party group business and we assume that we're going to work Monday to Friday, even councillors should have some home life, some family life. We're entitled to that. That's more than 5 hours a day on average that councillors on average are working, if those numbers are correct. And from my own experience, I think that is not unusual, to be honest. And so some weeks I put in far more than that. So if working those sorts of hours, and members may disagree, members may say no, we're putting in nowhere near those sorts of hours. But if we do, that means that's a 0.7 full-time equivalent. So for every 3 councillors, that's 2 full-time jobs. So my view is this: if we want people to be attracted, we want to increase the number of young people, particularly those who are working full-time, maybe raising a family, and now, you know, the economics have changed. Now, most households need 2 working people to pay a mortgage. And that's putting a lot of pressure on whoever else is at home for a councillor to come in and do this work. And we need to be encouraging people to apply to be councillors. There are people across this borough, I know, that have the skills that we need in this chamber, but maybe do not have that sort of amount of time to commit, but would actually do an excellent job. So how do we get them into this chamber if we say to them, oh, by the way, you're going to be working 25 hours a week on top of your day job? So I don't see how we can justify that. And we talk about, you know, a modest reduction in money if we reduce the numbers. That also means by the balance that we're talking about a modest amount to increase the numbers. And then we look at the number of wards. So at the moment, you know, if we go there, if we remain at 42, we're going to take a ward out of the equation. That's going to be huge changes to ward boundaries. Yeah, very, very significant changes. And some wards are going to expand because it's going to be on a numbers basis. And some of those wards that expand will actually take in a lot more of the deprived areas of this borough, I think. To my mind, for the additional amount of money, and in the grand scheme of things, actually what we pay a councillor for a 0.7 full-time equivalent is not very much. I mean, none of us are here for the money. I think it's justified, actually, to increase it up to 45 and retain the 15 wards. Yes, it will still be a little bit of movement within the ward boundaries, but we have to future-proof as well. We are saying that the population will increase, and we've also got devolution coming around the corner, and that's going to take up a lot more time. Probably many as a quarter of this chamber are actually going to be sitting on other committees. You know, who's going to volunteer to do it? And that's not without any additional expenses. Who's got the time to do that? So to my mind, and I know it's maybe an unpalatable thing to think, the number of increasing number of councillors, but I think there's things that councillors can do, this stuff, extra stuff that I would like to do. To be honest, I just don't have the time to do it, and I'm semi-retired. So that would be my perspective. Increase it, and I know that may not be popular, and I see, you know, there are alternative views, but that's where I am. Thank you,
Councillor Shreve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very interesting listening to debate, and I know there are strongly held views on all sides, but I'd remind the chamber that a ward boundary working group came together on a politically balanced, so they were representative of all the political parties, and they unanimously recommended maintenance of 42. So I'm really surprised.
Sorry, just a
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, just on a point of explanation or a point of order, that wasn't the case. Actually, 2 members of that committee actually voted to increase the number. It wasn't a unanimous decision.
Okay.
Just so we're clear.
Councillor Shreve.
Sorry, but, well, it was my understanding it was unanimous. But the recommendation that's come back from that working group is that we stay with 42, and I'm going to support that.
Any further members wishing to speak? Councillor Casmara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't, in all good conscience, support this recommendation for multiple reasons. Mainly the evidence, as already mentioned, is quite weak. It doesn't seem to go into the detail that's needed. And in a lot of points, I agree with Councillor Holland. The work that's needed in a lot of these more deprived wards does consist of many more hours than in others. And the idea that we could essentially be taking 3 community champions, 3 people that are championing the difficulties of residents and people across North East Lincolnshire out of the equation, simply by keeping it, when really we do need to increase and make it known that actually we do value the people out there that elect us. So for all those reasons, I won't be supporting the recommendation, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Leader to reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, first of all, the recommendation of the status quo, i.e. 42 members, it's not just, you know, because it is what we're doing now. I think there is a fairly robust set of evidence within this document that demonstrates that 42 is the right number. And I have to say, I do agree with most of what Councillor Holland has said in his speech, and it's not very often I've been able to say that since he got elected, but on this occasion I do. I wouldn't actually support an increase to 45, but I think all the arguments he puts forward about the amount of time that elected members put in and the fact that we want to try and attract more young people in who have probably got work commitments and career commitments if we want good people in local government, I think we need to take that into account. I mean, Councillor Wheatley is right that between the 2001 and 2021 census, the population of North East Lincolnshire did fall slightly. But if you look at the latest figures we've got between 2021 and 2023, there has actually been a 0.5% increase in the population. And I think this is starting to happen because of the new job opportunities we're seeing in the area now and the growth in the area. And I think that that population increase is set to continue, particularly when we bear in mind, of course, that the population of the UK as a whole is growing. I think it's fairly inevitable that we will end up with more people living in North East Lincolnshire. So, and then, of course, as Councillor Holland quite rightly said, there's the devolution issue to think about. Inevitably, we are going to end up with some sort of a devolution deal. In the future, the current government has made it very clear it wants to extend devolution, and undoubtedly that's going to mean a greater time commitment from elected members, whatever that might look like. So we need to take that into account as well. So with all those considerations and what I think is a pretty robust evidence base, I would urge the council to stick with the recommendation from the working group of 42 members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I will now.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Elected members, forgive me if you feel I'm overstepping the mark, but I feel that Rob would interject at this point, just to remind members of the content of the report, that the submission must be made by next Wednesday, 24th of July. If I can draw members' attentions to paragraph 2.1 of the report, failure to complete the submission would result in the council having no say in the recommendations put forward by the LGBCE. But members will be voting on the submission as it stands and appended to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. I will now take a vote on this matter. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, Nurseries Consultation Review Report. To consider the report of the Independent Nurses Consultation Review. This report was considered by the Children and Lifelong Learning Scrutiny Panel at its meeting 7th of March 2024, and the matter was referred to Council to further consider the findings and discuss the recommendations within the report. Councillor Jackson, do you have a proposal?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the basis that the recommendations at the end of the report are all around governance, I rise to move that we receive the report tonight and refer it to the Audit and Governance Committee for them to oversee the recommendations and have oversight of their implementation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second.
Any members of the council wishing to speak? Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What a mess we found ourselves in. This report has obviously followed on from the botched consultation that took place last year and makes for extremely sobering reading. I do not intend, Mr. Mayor, to make this any kind of finger-pointing exercise or try and apportion blame to either officer or member, as I don't at this point believe it would be either helpful or useful to do so. However, it is really important that we make sure that this situation never happens again. I am sad, Mr. Mayor, that this report had to be brought to full council, and more so that the situation resulting in its writing arose in the first place. But it did, and here we are. I am reassured that the report is thorough and has brought forward a number of recommendations for this council to consider, which I and the Labour Group are happy to support. What I'm less content about is the seemingly chaotic approach to what is a key decision and the lack of understanding of any due process from both officers and members. I'm also dismayed at the sidelining of scrutiny within the whole scenario. On page 73 of the report, 5.29, it specifically states that it does not appear that scrutiny had been factored into the post-publication timeline. In the previous report, earlier in this meeting, in the boundary review, it specifically mentions pre-cabinet scrutiny, and yet here is an example of scrutiny not being considered, consulted, or even being acknowledged as part of the process until after the decision had been made by cabinet. A discussion around where a potential meeting of the scrutiny panel might fit into the timeline was only considered rather than be an integral part of an established process. I am therefore surprised, Mr. Mayor, that nowhere in the recommendations is there any reference to the scrutiny process. This must be rectified, as we cannot let ourselves be in the situation of not knowing A, what a key decision is, B, what a consultation is, and C, whether we as members are getting all of the information in a timely manner. We are elected members of this council and as such must have the confidence in the information we are provided with to make informed decisions. This report, by stating in page 83, 7.14, that whether the relevant information was withheld rightly or wrongly, the failure to provide an effective narrative as to why certain information was not being provided led to a perception that the council had an underlying agenda, has damaged the confidence that we members must have, and regaining trust and confidence is something that often takes time to rebuild. Time we don't really have, and therefore these things must happen, and they must happen quickly and be enacted in a decisive and effective manner so that we are not putting any of our other service partners in this same terrible position again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I think the review is a review, and I don't intend to go around the houses again. There's a couple of points that I'd like to make, because I don't think this is just about governance, actually. I think it's about children, it's about parents, about guardians, it's about teachers and staff at the nurseries. And there are a couple of bits on the report that I think should be picked up and maybe referred to the Children's Scrutiny Committee as well as to the Audit and Governance Committee. And in particular, it'd be good to get a view on the impact the consultations had on demand for places, and whether the funding seemingly misallocated to Weston has been allocated back to Scatha Nursery. So a couple of bits there that relate to the services that I don't think are washed through thoroughly enough in the paper. And I'd welcome a view from Children's Scrutiny on both those issues, because I think they're key to long-term sustainability and viability of our nursery places.
Any further speakers? Councillor, I'm forgetting your name, sorry, Councillor Humphrey, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having known you for a few decades, I'm a bit disappointed you forgot my name, but never mind. One of these nurseries is in the ward that I reside and now represent, although obviously I wasn't at the time of this. And actually, Councillor Henderson sort of preempted some of my points. I wanted to mention, what about the impact on the nurseries, on the employees, the children, the parents, and the wider community, whether that's financial, reputational, etc. It doesn't seem to go into any depth in that, and I appreciate it's a report about governance, but still, maybe that recommendation would assist. I note that there was a number of the ward councillors that were interviewed, and my colleague Councillor Shepherd is quoted, but the other ward councillors don't even get mentioned. So I'm a bit baffled as to what they said, what they contributed, but I suppose that's in the past now. But then the report on a similar theme, it talks of the importance of involving ward councillors, but there's no recommendations about that. So how do we sort of rest assured that ward councillors would be involved at an earlier point going forward? Is that part of the governance review? Hopefully it is. But I just found the recommendations a bit general, and I was a bit surprised that, having gone to the trouble of having a report, it basically said improve governance, which I thought was common sense. Governance is something that's continuously being improved, I would hope, and I'm sure it is, but it needed to be applied more to the circumstances we've had, and again, the impact on the people concerned, and financial and reputational, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Humphrey. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to support this motion, although Councillor Jackson might actually not be aware that this has already been preempted because it's going to be going to the Audit and Governance panel anyway. But I'm glad for his support on this. But once again, the administration has found itself somewhat behind on events over this issue. And I'm very proud to say that it was the Labour group that got this matter brought to scrutiny. It's the Labour group that brought this matter to full council. And it's a Labour group that's brought this matter to Audit and Governance. This is what accountability and transparency looks like. It's very difficult to find anything new to actually say on this matter, Mr. Mayor, other than I would repeat what I've said previously. This is an absolute comedy of errors. Communication has been absolutely shocking between officers and between portfolio holders, with varying accountability is given in the report on what the events actually were in the timeline. Public engagement has been embarrassing and sometimes downright farcical. For example, when we were told at first that this is a consultation on closure, then we were told this is a consultation on maybe closure. And then when the question was asked around why have the staff in these nurseries been issued with redundancy notices, the officers at that particular scrutiny meeting weren't actually even aware that this had actually happened. This has caused reputational damage to the council. It's caused reputational damage to the nurseries. And worst of all, we played politics with people's lives. That is unforgivable, Mr. Mayor. We've referred this to the Audit and Governance panel, and no doubt we'll do our best to actually get to the bottom of this. And one thing I'm actually particularly looking forward to is that this will be a chance to discuss with our monitoring officer as our head of governance as to his own thoughts and proposals on this matter moving forwards as well. One thing, however, that is missing from this report tonight, Mr. Mayor, was I did actually push at scrutiny for a 6th recommendation to come to full council, and for some reason it has vanished in the ether. I don't have the wording with me tonight, but it's regards the lack of involvement of scrutiny. So I would like a 6th recommendation proposed tonight, Mr. Mayor, that at all times scrutiny should have been far more involved within this process, and scrutiny should in the future be involved with matters such as this, that are key decisions that have such profound impacts on people's lives in North East Lincolnshire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Is that 6th recommendation seconded?
I rise to second, and we'll speak if I need to.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few days ago, I attended the Great Coats Village Nursery
Sorry,
Summer.
Councillor Holm, I do beg your pardon, but as an amendment has been proposed and seconded, we're now talking to the proposed amendment given by Councillor Patrick that there be a sixth recommendation that scrutiny be involved in processes such as these.
That this council believes scrutiny should have been far more involved throughout the process from an earlier state, and that when matters such as this, key decisions that have such profound impact on the lives of people of this borough, scrutiny should be involved where appropriate so also.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Patrick. Do you wish to speak on this matter, Councillor Holland?
No, I don't.
Anybody wishing to speak on that sixth recommendation of the report, to be added to the report? No? Councillor Shutt.
Yeah, I'm sure Councillor Patrick has good intentions with his recommendation or his amendment, and I fully support that. Thank you.
And members will put it to the vote. This is the amendment proposed by Councillor Patrick, seconded by Councillor Shutt, that there be a sixth recommendation going forward, which my colleague in Democratic Services has verbatim obliged.
All those in favour of that sixth recommendation? Anybody against? Thank you. Councillor Holland, did you want to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so a few days ago, I attended the Great Coats Village Nursery School Summer Fair, and it was great to chat to the teachers and see so many staff, children, parents and supporters from the village having a great time. It was tinged, I have to say, with a bit of reflection on what had been the case a year previously when I'd been sat in the Great Coats Village Nursery staff room talking to the staff at that point. And I have to say, it's nice to see that it's been resolved, but equally, the staff should never have been put in that position in the first place. And I'm not going to be overcritical of people tonight. We're past that now. But what I would like to do is to pay tribute to the head teacher and the staff of that school who fought like tigresses throughout that period of time. And also, I'd like to mention Ken Vincent, who worked hard on behalf of his union members and is sadly no longer with us. So the report, yes, it is a damning indictment of poor governance, poor decision making, poor communication. And I think it actually goes further than that. To my mind, it exposes breaches of the Nolan principles of public life in terms of acting with openness and honesty. Information should not be withheld from the public unless there are clear and lawful reasons for so doing. And it is clear that information was withheld from the public, from members, particularly with respect to rebuilding costs that actually turned out to be fictitious. I'm pleased it's to be considered by the Audit and Governance Committee, and I'm sure it will be done so in great detail. I would just add one further point on this. This was a textbook case in how not to manage change. A key question is whether this was an isolated case within a service area under significant financial and delivery pressure, or whether there are wider, even systemic weaknesses within our organisation. The recommendations within the report do point to a wider problem. They are targeted generally to the organisation and are not specific to children's services. So I know that the recommendations were drawn up by a legal firm, but I think once we get to audit and governance, there's something else that we need to look at, and a further recommendation, which I hope may be coming from that work. And that's head of service and key officers, and perhaps even members, should receive formal training in change management. It is one of the key management areas which can be so tricky to get right and very easy to get wrong, often with calamitous results when the arrow has been fired and it can't be stopped. A responsibility assignment matrix, just as one example, would have ensured almost from the outset that legal were fully consulted and avoided them trying to put out the bushfire late in the day and in the full public glare. I'm still of the opinion that a policy should be forthcoming from an ELC to staff, parents and public. And this would go a long way, I think, to restoring public confidence in our organisation, and will right a wrong and draw a line under this episode. This is not about politics. This is about doing the right thing.
you very much, councillor. Councillor Shreve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor C seconded the motion, but
And
did
reserve
not
the right to
reserve the
speak.
right to speak.
I reserve the right to speak.
No, you never.
Only 2%.
We have a difference of opinion at the top table. My colleague in Democratic Services thinks not. Mr. Mayor thinks he did. Mr. Mayor, you are the chair of this meeting. You may permit.
I'm going to allow councillor Shreve to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And if I did omit that, my apologies, councillor Wilson. I do require the forbearance of members in my speech because I'm going to talk about the issue. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what followed because many members may not be aware of that. And I think it helps to inform the rectification work that went on afterwards. First of all, the consultation had multiple failings, and I've been reported in the press and in this chamber of saying it was a car crash, and it was. So a word about the report. Whilst I don't agree with any of its recommendations, it is a matter of regret that the author of the report, in some cases, did not attempt to corroborate findings by speaking to those named. As just one small example, and it's the only one I'll quote, the report refers to the planned consultation being referred to informal cabinet. A simple check would have confirmed that that did not happen. I don't think it changes the findings, but it does change one or two things. The cabinet did not see this before it was initiated. However, we are where we are and the report is before you, and I'm pleased that there's an appetite for it to go to audit and governance. But this is where I need your forbearance. You can call a point of order and force me to sit down, but I do think this information is relevant and interesting to all members. Finally, it was clear early in the consultation that it was flawed. Leader, Councillor Jackson, did not hesitate to cancel the consultation, and it was the leader himself who requested the independent review of the governance issues. So I think you all need to know that. Subsequent to this, a series of meetings was established by Leader where he asked me to chair a small committee to include Leader, myself, Councillor Cracknell, the heads of each nursery, governors, and in some cases, ward and parish councillors, and parents, plus other supporting council officers. The specific aims of these meetings was to discuss issues, support, and encourage the three settings to develop plans to achieve sustainability. There were 4 such meetings with each of the nurseries across the municipal year and additional visits to the sites, at which we witnessed the development of their plans, supported by council officers, as they focused on the delivery of a secure future and also an understanding of the risks associated with these plans. In all cases, sufficient progress was made for the committee to be stood down by me, with the settings placed back into mainstream monitoring and support structures under the Director of Children's Services and part of the normal scrutiny process. I do ask myself, would the settings have achieved these outcomes without these group discussions? And I think the answer to that is no. The reasons did not consider some of these matters of details as day-to-day business. They just didn't. And the detail would be part of day-to-day, and with help in some cases, learnt about the development of business plans, with one nursery in particular. All settings have taken steps to market themselves, and the responsiveness in terms of pupil headcount is encouraging. Let's hope it stays that way. But members, the activities described above have taken a full year, and yet it's tonight that we're receiving this result. Jolly good. It's been it has been Children's Scrutiny and Audit Committee have already identified a desire to review the governance matters. However, I hope the few words that I've said about what subsequently occurred will help members to understand, and I hope that it served its purpose. And I thank you for your forbearance on that. The matters raised in the report are governance and important, and the audit governance is the right place for these to be read. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's clearly been major communication issues in this. Councillor Cracknell, as portfolio holder, has previously apologised for the distress caused. We now need to adopt the recommendations received and those to be agreed at Audit and Governance. We need to move on, working together to make our nurseries sustainable. The most recent DC's report is reassuring, and we will come to scrutiny on Thursday next week to look at that more closely. And I hope that will reassure members. Thank you.
Councillor Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to respond to the last point that Councillor Shreve made. The nursery in Sydney, Sussex, Reynolds Street Nursery, actually did have a robust business plan prior to this consultation. Was projected to reach the KPI targets that she'd been given. And the information that was advertised or whatever presented was actually not factually correct. The figures in this case were not correct. And that nursery is full this year already and has been for the last couple of months, which with the best will in the world would not have been possible if last year they were so badly behind and didn't have any prospect to actually meet their KPIs. So I would like to put that on record, and I also would like, as Councillor Holland has, to congratulate Tracy, who is the manager of Reynolds Street, and all of her team and the parents that all came together. We found out on the Friday, and I've never seen an action plan come in so quickly and people work so well. I am so proud of them. And from this, they've actually now got different groups, they're working together, and we've had lots of good outcomes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, a word of personal explanation. I did not name the nursery that had difficulty in producing a business plan. And I'm happy to echo the Councillor Farron's words about Reynolds, whose conduct throughout the whole process was exemplary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shreve. Any further members wishing to speak? Councillor Downs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to raise a couple of points, just echoing what Councillor Farron said. Greatcoats Nursery was always a viable nursery, and so some of the people who were involved in the process to prove that might find it quite insulting to her that it was your view that it was only viable due to those meetings that were held. The other thing I'd just like to add on record is that as a result of those meetings, which were chaired by yourself, Councillor Shreve, was that the nurseries were assured that there would be a public announcement to say that they were now open for business and to give them a little bit of a leg up, I guess, in terms of members of the public not knowing whether they should put their children into that nursery or not. And as I'm aware, that hasn't yet happened. So I'd just like that to also go on record.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Councillor Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just rising really to give members some reassurance. The nursery and the progress is a standing item on children's agenda. And so we will have oversight on everything that is being done going forward. And we will do our utmost to make sure this council is doing the best to keep the nurseries afloat, make them resilient. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sylvester. Any further members? Ask the leader to reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really want to say very much more because I think certainly from my viewpoint, Councillor Shreve set out very clearly the various steps that happened after I decided as leader to pull what was clearly a very flawed consultation. And I think that was exactly the right thing to do, and also instigate this independent report. And as I say, Councillor Shreve has explained in some detail what happened from then on. I share many of the concerns that members from across the chamber have expressed this evening about how this happened and what happened. And it is absolutely essential that we address the issues that led to those problems. Hence the fact that we've got a governance review around what happened regarding the consultation and the communications issues. And in my view, the failure to comply with normal governance arrangements, which I, as leader of the council, would have expected to have happened. More importantly, we're now in a position, we are looking forward, and we're now in a position where hopefully the three settings are going to be viable in the future. I think there have been some issues around communication because of PERDA, but we can take that away and look at it with regard to the assuring parents about the settings remaining open. So I'm sure we can have a look at that one. Just to say, I do welcome the additional recommendation that Councillor Patrick put forward. I'm a great believer in the role of scrutiny within the local authority, which I've said on a number of occasions. And I think if they're involved in this sort of thing, that can only help to strengthen our governance arrangements and the assurance that members have in the future. So I hope members will support the recommendation, and I know the Audit and Governance Committee will be robust in the work that it subsequently does on this, and it needs to be. And as leader, I want to make sure that we're never again in this sort of situation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I will now take a vote on this matter. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 12, food providers. To consider a report from the portfolio holder for safer and stronger communities, providing a progress update on local community food provision and the associated issues. This report has been recast following the deferral of consideration of this matter at the meeting of the council on 14th of March 2024. I now ask the Monitor Officer to advise on consideration of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, I'm hoping that you can assist me this evening in dealing with an administrative anomaly on this particular matter. You'll see from the minutes of the last meeting that it was proposed by Councillor Shepherd and was then subject to an amendment by Councillor Aisthorpe. That matter then stood deferred from last March. We're now presented with a new report which has been recast and recalibrated. So the actual substance of the motion back in March has been superseded somewhat. What I'm minded to do, unless there's any dissent from the floor, is deem the last report formally withdrawn and in consultation with Councillor Aisthorpe, deem her amendment withdrawn, allow Councillor Shepherd to start afresh, and afford Councillor Aisthorpe the professional courtesy of being invited to speak first once proposed and seconded. Is there any objection to that course of action, members? I'm obliged. Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to get right so the camera gets my best side. Sorry. Mr. Mayor, I rise to present the report as laid out. There are a couple of items that I just want to clarify. I have evidenced the extent of the engagement with the food providers over the last 12 months, which has included attendance and contributions to the regular food forum meetings which take place. And I continue to have a lot of oversight of work being undertaken with and by the community in the area. There was a misunderstanding in council when the original motion was passed in that there is no specific food poverty action plan. However,
there have been agreed actions with partner organisations that have taken place to help mitigate and support people who experience difficulty in accessing affordable food. Two major funding streams have been provided capacity to support council actions in this area: the Housing Support Fund and the Holiday Activity Fund. North East Links Council is represented on the Greater Lincolnshire Food Partnership Forum and has recently been successful in supporting the re-establishment of a North Lincolnshire Food Partnership. It should also be noted that the Director of Public Health's annual report has highlighted the food we eat as one of the 8 wider determinants of health. This will be one of the areas of focus for the future work of the Health and Wellbeing Board. In terms of distribution of surplus food, providers do share the surplus that they have and are encouraged to minimise waste. The food coordinator has also from time to time been contacted with surplus food offers and facilitated the sharing as appropriate. In respect of disposal of food no longer safe for consumption, this has not been possible to progress to date, but given the £1.2 million announced by government for the rollout of the food waste collection from 2025, officers will seek to integrate local food banks into future arrangements. Mr. Mayor, the visits to all providers were originally envisaged to take 6 months. It's taken a lot longer. As you can appreciate, it's a bigger job than what we actually thought. At the March 2024 full council meeting, an amendment was proposed that the Food Poverty Action Plan be referred to the community scrutiny panels for review. While the council does not have a Food Poverty Action Plan, it is suggested that any plans form part of the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board and be considered in due course by the communities and health scrutiny panels. Mr. Mayor, I would be happy to support a letter to the Minister requesting more funding. I would also be very happy to engage with our 2 MPs to clarify their positions. But before we send any letters, I think that we need to look at the situation on the community scrutiny panel in September. Mr. Mayor, the recommendations are that this report be received. It is also recommended that the members of the community scrutiny panel be invited to visit the 2 main food banks in the area. Mr. Mayor, that said, I present the report with a slight delay, which I apologise for, but I think now going forward we have a very robust plan. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Astrop, would you like to open the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remain dissatisfied with the report as it stands, particularly as it fails to outline any particular actions necessary to address food poverty in our borough. Mr. Mayor, may I read to you a report issued yesterday by GI Grimsby News on this very matter? It said, studies have been shown that hundreds of parents in Grimsby said they are regularly skipping meals to afford necessities for their children. According to recent figures, around 35% of children in Grimsby are living below the poverty line, highlighting the extent of the issue on our own doorstep. Mr. Mayor, I would again remind the Council that the Liberal Democrats originally proposed action on the matter of food poverty over a year ago, centred around a written food poverty action plan, which has yet to been agreed upon or produced. A written food poverty action plan is essential in my view. It is unacceptable to claim that a verbal plan or some work done is sufficient to address this crisis. Mr. Mayor, without a clear, documented and evidence-based plan, how can we scrutinise the effects of the work, identify gaps or ensure that actions taken are even appropriate? Mr. Mayor, the delay since our original motion back in March last year is only exasperating hardship, leaving more people struggling to choose between essentials like food and heating. As predicted in my warning back in March, our borough has now lost its food coordinator, and we still don't know where we stand with the Household Support Fund ending in 2.5 months' time. Mr. Mayor, may I remind the council that the Household Support Fund has been a lifeline for thousands of local children and families facing hardship who would otherwise struggle to buy food or heat their homes. Without urgent extension of the Household Support Fund or a sustainable successor, more local households risk falling into financial crisis, homelessness and poverty. It is perhaps no wonder our area is receiving such negative reports in the local press. Mr. Mayor, practical action that can be monitored and scrutinised needs to be agreed upon now. Therefore, I propose to move an amendment to the recommendations of the Food Providers Report, similar to the one I proposed back in March, which is as follows. 1. A food poverty action plan is produced as part of the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board to be considered by both the Communities and Health Scrutiny Panel. And 2. That the portfolio holder refers to the matter to the area's 2 local members of parliament to lobby on behalf of the council for a further extension of the Household Support Fund or a sustainable successor source. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aceville. Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Any members wishing to speak on the matter? Councillor Holland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I was of the clear understanding that we did have a food poverty action plan, and that was my clear understanding from the previous meeting. And I think it's important actually that we do have one, even if it's only just so that we measure the problem and we know which specific areas of the borough are affected, how many people are affected, and we get a very, very clear picture of what the problem is. So on that basis, I would support the amendment that's been proposed.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I support this as well. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think having a strategy, a plan, operations in place, properly funded, properly resourced is kind of base camp, isn't it, for any kind of initiative like this. But I just would want to just draw attention to the need to have this properly resourced. I think the food bank coordinator did an absolutely amazing job. And there's a lot of work, as Councillor Shepherd points out, that happened. It's not that people aren't doing things, they're just not doing them in a coordinated way. And if we're going to replace that role or continue that role, it's important we set the person up for success who's doing that. We get behind them, we give them the right backing, give them clear terms of reference, and they get the right support they need from members and officers.
Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support the amendments. And whilst this report does cover more of the initial council resolution than previously, there are still questions that I believe are unanswered. On page 85 through 86, 1.1 of the report, it states that the council continue to work with the appointed cabinet member to champion the reduction and prevention of food poverty throughout the borough. The portfolio evidenced the extent of his engagement with food providers over the past 12 months, which has included attendance and contributions to a regular food forum meeting, which you mentioned earlier. Well, good for him. There's not a mention of how our champion, with his attendance at these meetings, has reduced the prevention of food poverty, however. No numbers around the amount of people using food banks being up or down. Any more people, or how many more people in food poverty there are now than last year. It is also noted within the report on page 86 that it should be noted that the Director of Public Health's annual report has highlighted the food we eat as one of the 8 wider determinants of health, and this will be one of the areas of focus for the future work of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Well, Mr. Mayor, as there are no opposition members on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and the only opportunity that we get to ask questions on that board is here at full council, and the reports can often be several weeks or months old by the time it gets here, it actually might show some more transparency and openness if an opportunity for a member of one of the opposition parties were to be given a seat at that table and included as a full member of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Page 87 of the report, it states that visits to all providers were originally envisaged to take 6 months, but these took longer than expected. I wonder, Mr. Mayor, it's because there are more than what were expected. This brings me, Mr. Mayor, to the funding of the coordinator that is to cease at the end of the month. We in the Labour group are really concerned that this post is not deemed valuable to us or the food banks that operate in our area. In fact, I am sure that it is. And so the cessation of the funding by the council at this point in time is more than short-sighted. Whilst I accept that external funding is continuing to be explored, time is running out, Mr. Mayor, and I speak from experience that once something is lost, the likelihood of it being returned is minimal. I would therefore urge this council to reconsider the funding package and to step up its bidding process to ensure that the work carried out by the coordinator is not lost, and continue the work with the local communities, partner organisations and this council to benefit all of our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shreve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to rise to support this amendment. And as chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board and an attender at the Health Scrutiny Panel, which is the natural vehicle for for the member discussion on these things, we will be dealing with this as an important agenda item. As to membership of the Health and Wellbeing Board, in principle, I've got no problem with a representative of the Labour group being on there, but I do need to check whether it's constitutionally possible. And if it is, then I'm sure I'll make the correct overtures. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shreve. Any further speakers on this matter? Councillor Harness.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to support the amendment on the basis that the Household Support Fund came through my portfolio. It was due to end in March. Then last minute we got a 6-month extension, and it was really disappointing that it wasn't a 1-year extension, which would have taken it through the winter period. On that basis, I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harness. Any further speakers? Councillor Morland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. And it's great to be able to speak on this side, knowing we have a Labour government in power. I don't want to repeat things that have been said, Mr. Mayor, but I do find that I heard that. I do wish to draw the attention to everyone, and especially residents of this borough, to the fact that we have now over 3,000 food banks in this country, which shows a condemnation of what had gone previously before. And I am disappointed that we have not gone any further, and I hope we will be able to retain the food bank coordinator, because we need someone to be able to look at statistics that are not available in this report. We don't know who is being kept, who is not able to afford, etc., etc. Food, rent, so on and so forth, because of the cost of living crisis that's been heaped upon us over the last 14 years. However, what I do want to say is that, quite simply, we need, and the residents of this borough deserve, a more actioned approach on this matter. People in poverty don't seek to be in poverty. People are put there by decisions of administrators, governors, etc. And it behoves us to help, as elected members, whatever our colour politically, to assist with that process. Now, if I was someone in poverty, thankfully I'm not, but if I was, I'd want to know exactly what this council was doing about it. We've had a year. I'm sorry, but it's not good enough. It really is not good enough. And the fact that people in poverty have to rely on food banks is an absolute scandal in a so-called civilized society. It's an absolute scandal. and I would like to see food banks not exist if possible. However, as they do, it behoves us to act far quicker than this report does, which is why I shall be backing the amendments made earlier tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further speakers? I ask Councillor Shepherd to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I fully support the amendment. I think I've already said in my speech that we do need to engage with our local MPs and also address the position of the food action, the food poverty action plan. Put it right. My challenge back to you all is this morning at 11 o'clock. I was at the food bank in Freeman Street, and they're still waiting to see elected members in there. Still waiting. You can shake your head as much as you want, Councillor Aesop. You've never been. Yeah, I was there this morning. When you go, then you can start to tell us what it's like. But I support your amendment tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Sir. Yeah. Members are now voting on the amendment. I will now take a vote on the amendment. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous, that is, members. Is there any speakers on the substantive motion? I'm looking round, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'll now take a vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, members. Item 13, amendments to places on committees and panels of the council to consider a report from the monitoring officer advising of the proposed changes to places on the committees and panels of the council. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the report's fairly self-explanatory and I rise to move the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I rise to second and reserve the right to speak, which is very unlikely in this case.
Anybody wants to speak on this matter? Thank you very much, members. Yep. I'll now take a vote on this matter. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Item 14, notice of motion. A notice of motion has been submitted by Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Holland, submitted in accordance with the Council's constitution. Councillor Henderson, you have 10 minutes in which to propose the motion.
Thank you. Let me start by saying what I'm trying to achieve with this motion. I'm seeking to account to the public for the financial performance of the council, to provide reassurance that we're investing money wisely, to demonstrate grip on projects, to understand where projects are at risk of going awry, or to celebrate when they're going well, and to demonstrate that we, as members, are discharging our responsibilities, and primarily to try and repair some of the trust issues that we've clearly got with members of the public that we'll all have heard when we door knocked in May. In North East Lincolnshire, we're entering an exciting period of economic activity, fuelled not least by sizable government handouts and land sale. The opportunities presented by the green energy industry, developments in food technology and production, the growth of our port and tourism are significant. We all want these opportunities to be realised so that the area thrives as a great place to live and work. And we heard more from the leader on that earlier on. However, with opportunity comes risk. We are in a difficult financial position. We need to prioritise what we do and do priority things well. We know that our strategy for unlocking the opportunity and managing the risk is to be more commercial as a council. We've seen a commitment to projects like SHIP, the master plans for Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and the purchase of Freshney Place. These projects must succeed. We've not won the public over with this strategy. We've not won their trust that we can use their money wisely. We're not famous for delivering large projects well. Consider the Corporation Street Bridge as an example of a material project in terms of cost, duration, impact on business and local amenity. The project is late, seems to lack management grip, and it's unclear how much it's going to cost and what the benefits are. We cannot replicate the mistakes of this project when we embark on the much wider, ambitious and crucial portfolio of projects I've described. So we need to do something different, not just to account to the public and ourselves for performance, but to put the right controls in place. We need to ensure that our investments bring benefits and our projects are not detrimental. As we enter a world where projects are more and more important to us, the Independent Group are proposing that the Council adopts project accounting to enable financial governance over our most material projects. For those who are unfamiliar with project accounting, put simply, it's an approach to accounting that shows clearly what project money is being used for, what benefits it's delivering, and whether projects are contributing to council coffers or taking money out. While project accounting was traditionally used for large construction, engineering, and government projects, it's now expanded into several other sectors and has become an industry standard approach. It doesn't replace the CIPFA-based approach that we use at the moment. It doesn't go against anything that we've heard from the audit team. It's an industry standard approach. Of course, we do govern projects now. We report our financials to government accounting standards. We use Green Book business cases to secure investment, and we have scrutiny and audit. You'll have seen reference to our accounting practices and use of Green Book in the productivity paper circulated yesterday. But this doesn't work because we don't follow through on what we promised. The information is late, incomplete, counts inputs and not outcomes, and generally does not allow us to judge whether we are using money properly. We bid for money using the right governance, and we make promises in good faith to the public, but we never present the full picture on performance. And this makes residents sceptical that we're really following through on the investments we make. And they're right to be sceptical. For example, we often hear that Freshney Place is making a profit. However, what we mean is that the management company is delivering a net operating income to the council on the services that within its scope. We do not know how much the total project is costing, or even if there is a total project. We don't know whether we're going to need more money. We see market occupancy and the number of traders in the town centre falling, and we don't know the implications of this on the overall project. We don't know by when we need to have signed contracts with restaurants to make the food court viable. We don't know how much Parkway are putting into the cinema and how much of the cost, for example, capital costs relating to the building, are on our plate. It is impossible for members to understand whether the overall project is going to be a net contributor to our economy because there is not a single project budget. Implementing a change of this nature will require much discussion. This is the start of it. For example, we will need to work together to clarify what we mean by materiality and how we create governance that allocates responsibility for the financial performance of projects, as well as guaranteeing they're appropriately assured. But we need to do it. Mr. Mayor, how many times have we sat in meetings and been unable to ascertain exactly who is on the hook for the financial performance of projects? In fact, GI Media are running a story on this only today, with a picture of the leader next to a picture of the chief exec of the council, asking who's in charge. We don't know, after the funding has been approved, how much a project's going to cost, how much it's costing, and how much does that vary from what we said it was going to cost when we started. How many times have we been unable to show that our investments have created benefits, especially cash releasing benefits that are directly attributable to the intervention we made? How many times have we been unable to account for our performance on projects to the public? How many times have we failed to manage public expectations relating to projects and fallen short of their expectations in what we've delivered? So we propose 6 things. First thing, thank you for the humour, Councillor Shearer, I wasn't aware it was funny. First thing is to create a register of material projects and a mechanism for their financial performance to be reviewed. A mechanism that tells us whether the project as a whole is a net contributor or detractor from our local economy. 2, ensure each material project has an assured Green Book business case, especially including a cash flow analysis and being clear as to what funding will be released from the project to the council as benefits are realised, and then monitor and report on that, rather than the partial reporting that we get to different committees at the moment, where we have to piece the Lego together to make the picture that should have been on the front of the Lego box. Thirdly, establish ownership of the project budget for each project and create an accountability framework within which that owner must operate. This is beyond supporting scrutiny of different aspects of the project with the intention of giving good news. This is a clear-eyed, open and honest overview. 4, report the financial performance of each project on a quarterly basis using the Treasury Green Book model for cost and benefit tracking. Numbers, complete numbers, not narrative, not partial numbers, a complete view of where the project is at. 5, create an independent project scrutiny group based on expertise rather than allocating membership based on proportion of members from each political group and involving industry experts drawn from the public. We have a wealth of talent and experience in this room and in this town. And we need to set aside party politics to get the best out of this group of people. Finally, roll out a mandatory training programme for members so they understand project accounts and can have an informed conversation with officers and the public. We've heard already tonight that we've got issues with our knowledge, our learning and development, and our capability to engage on an appropriate basis with our very skilled officers. And it's incumbent on us as members to develop those skills so that we can discharge our responsibilities to the public. These 6 things will take some time and a little effort to implement. However, this discipline is essential to being able to prioritise projects in our portfolio, deliver projects successfully, provide the right degree of accountability, and avoid the current situation where it's next to impossible for members and officers to see the complete financial picture of our fantastic transformative work and explain that to our residents in a way that builds and fosters trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Holland, will you second?
Yeah, I rise a second and reserve the right to speak, Chris.
Councillor Shutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members, I must praise Councillor Henderson Holland for this detailed, well presented motion. Its goals are clear and the 6 specific actions proposed seem the best management practices for this alleged industry standard project accounting financial tool. That's the only time I'll say that. But Mr. Mayor, something does not feel right about this motion. Not its content, not the passion that is expressed in it. There's much to like. Although I must confess I'm no expert, as probably other members are no expert in project accounting. No, members, it's what this motion is asking us to do if we support it. Let me explain. In my short time as a member, I've developed a tremendous respect for the officers, and yes, you as members too. We members and officers working together to help make this area we live in a better place for all. We don't always agree, and sometimes we vehemently disagree. But that's democracy at work. In scrutiny, we members drill down for answers and then question those answers. Officers listen, advise, using their tools and skills to help members find the solutions we are seeking. Mr. Mayor, members, this motion proposes to impose project management tool on our officers with 6 specific actions proposed for inaction by this council. Councillors Henderson and Holland believe this will be a good additional financial monitoring tool, and they may be right, but I'm not sure. I don't feel qualified with a lack of knowledge about project accounting. And this motion, members, how do you feel about that? Do you feel qualified? I don't know, maybe we'll find out soon. I can tell you what's missing for me in this motion, and that's the measured technical advice from our officers on the viability of integrating project accounting into the council's toolbox. Given an opportunity to study and report on this motion's specific actions, officers may find much to support in these proposals. Members, I'm sure action point 6 of is interest to you, as it proposes a mandatory training programme in project accounting. Mr. Mayor, I have no objections to training for members. I support it because I attend as many as I can. It's an important part of our educational journey in our service to our communities, and of course we already have mandatory training in such things as planning. I just feel that I would like a discussion with colleagues, our leader, as to whether mandatory training was needed, and I'm sure other members and leaders feel the same. Mr. Mayor, I cannot support this motion, although there is much to be admired by the aims and aspirations within it. I currently don't feel suitably qualified or informed as to whether project accounting will be a good fit for this authority. Also, I believe that for this motion to get any traction, it needs more engagement and feedback from officers and members. Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Henderson and Holland are unwilling to defer or withdraw this motion for consultation, then I have an amendment to resolve the concerns I have raised. The amendment removes one word, just one word, inaction, from the line above the 6 specific actions in this motion to be replaced by consultation. The line will read as follows. The following 6 specific actions are proposed for consultation by this council. This amendment gives relevant officers, leaders and members an opportunity to consult and report on the 6 actions in this motion. Members will have officers' views and any recommendations put forward alongside their own. Councillor Henderson and Holland will be more informed as to what is possible and formulate a motion which officers and members can support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have a seconder for?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I do beg your pardon. Thank you, Councillor Shutt. But regrettably, any amendment to this notice of motion should be made on notice in writing. And there's an argument to say that if we move the word enact, it perhaps goes to negating the meaning of the motion. So I'm afraid I must rule your amendment out of order. I do apologise.
Would it be possible for you to forward me after this meeting in the constitution where it says that?
Certainly.
That's very kind, thank you.
Thank you, monitoring officer, for that advice. Councillor Morland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not often you'll find me quoting a Conservative politician, Edmund Burke. We are a representative democracy, and that's how we are elected. There is much to, I will continue that later. I will fill in with this gap. There's much to be admired in this motion, and I thoroughly like it in many respects. But I wonder if what we're doing is actually removing, as a representative of the people of this borough. That's what I am. I'm not an expert in everything. I don't intend to be. I expect the officers to give me their expertise. That's why we employ them. And I find that one of the problems we may have with this motion is that we actually tie people's hands. Every 3 months, that's 12 weeks. How long does that take? We've got to get things going. And in the management of certain things, and we've had the bridge mentioned, there are certain things that have arisen in relation to the bridge project, Alexander Road Bridge, that are actually out of the remit of what was expected to be found. And therefore, when we expect officers and ourselves under mandatory training, I'm not here to be an expert on everything. I'm here to be advised by officers, and I use that information to inform the public. I don't expect to be told, to be put in a straitjacket, that I must work to these financial restrictions. And when we talk about cost benefit analysis, if everything's going to be judged on its financial merits, then you'll have members of the public jumping up and down saying, I don't use the local libraries, they're a waste of money. Why have we got them? I don't use the street lighting. What's the point? I don't go out at night, so let's turn them off. This is the sort of nonsense we would have members of the public who are anti some things because of the cost. And we need to be careful that the public do understand the wider issues around any project. And therefore, I come back to the point, which is that if we go in for all this straitjacket approach, It doesn't allow the officers to via monies across, for example. We need to be aware that budgets need shifting. Certain parts of a development will happen quickly. Some things will be slowed down because certain things in any project, we will come up against things that we didn't realise were there. And that will slow down, and that may increase the costs. We may find that we can work quicker on a project, and that will reduce the costs. But to expect officers to be tied down to this for every 3 months, there are so many projects going on, it would be unreasonable to expect it of the officers. So I, Mr. Mayor, would have to say that, going back to what I said about Edmund Burke, we are representatives of the community. We are not mandatory financiers expected to be able to speak clearly on every issue. If a member of the public wants any information from me, I will seek out the relevant officer. I don't expect to have the facts and figures there at my fingertips. They're on our portals for the public to look at anyway. And I find to some extent that this actually undermines the professionalism of the very people we employ. We employ them to give us guidance, their professionalism, their knowledge and expertise. And I do not expect to have everything myself. We've all got our knowledge and expertise in our own particular areas, whether it's business, education, social care, healthcare, nursing, whatever. I don't expect the public, and I'm sure the public wouldn't expect their representatives to have full, at their fingertips, knowledge of project management. And yes, before anybody says, I do understand project management. I was involved in some at the local college when we moved from a local authority to a what they call privatisation of the colleges.
1 minute, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I wish to say. I am a representative, Mr. Mayor, not a mandated financier. Thank you very much. So I will not be supporting this notion. Thank you.
Councillor Shreve.
Points of order, Mr. Mayor. If I could refer the monitoring officer to the Council Constitution, page 118, item 12, motions without notice. The following motions may be moved without notice. Item H, to amend a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Duly noted. May I refer the elected member to Standing Order 13.6. I'm obliged.
Councillor Shreve.
Okay, whilst she's scrolling through the Constitution. It's no surprise, Mr. Mayor, that I'm rising to oppose the motion. I'm sure Councillor Henderson is sincere in his desire. And when he noted my amusement, it was not amusement about what it was saying. It was the number of times he said, we don't know, we don't know. I think we should replace that with he doesn't know, he doesn't know. I think he's sincere in his desire to see improved project management reporting, but I'm sorry to say he's missed the point and that's the wrong question. In my view, his proposals are purely operational and it takes no account of what's currently available, nor does it take account the view of the officers who would have to deal with this. It's probably born out of this frustration of what he sees as a lack of information and progress of expenditure on major projects at a time when there are many more major projects coming onto the books, and one notable project, and he's mentioned himself, where there has been a significant overrun, which is now being discussed at scrutiny with a new timetable, and there's a clear understanding of the issues that created that problem in the first place. To a certain extent, Cabinet have shared these concerns and have done something about it, given the magnitude of our project needs going forward. Firstly, we've brought project management back in-house. It was previously dealt with by an outside company. Secondly, to complement existing reporting, more about that in a minute, we have requested a new project management report covering all major projects which have either financial, reputational risk or political implications, and have been discussing various drafts, including formal formatting of this report. We saw the latest iteration earlier this week, and we expect the report to be published each quarter and published each month. This report will go to scrutiny and to all group leaders. I'll just talk a little bit about current project management because there's a wide array of information available. Project management capability has been enhanced by bringing project management back into house, enabling hands-on project management by our own officers, the benefits of which have already been seen, and that team is in place. The HNT Green Book, His Majesty's Treasury business case is already well established within the council in terms of external funding bids to government and our own internal business case development process. This is obviously used by His Majesty's Treasury, so the risk of duplication is avoided. All capital projects are separately identified and detailed within the improved capital programme as agreed by full council. Financial report performance is reported quarterly as part of the quarterly monitoring, approved by Cabinet and referred to scrutiny, and all projects are reviewed and reported internally on a monthly basis, a standard tool within the Council's project management arrangements. Governance and assurance. Major projects have established boards or oversight arrangements which monitor progress, seek assurance against plan, identifying mitigation of risk, usually monthly, and these are also subject to monthly challenge sessions with finance. Every project has a senior project sponsor and reports into the appropriate portfolio holder. All projects over 350,000 must be approved by Cabinet as part of the Constitution. Scrutiny has oversight of performance and can ask for and receive regular briefings and updates on major schemes and projects. Increasingly, we are utilising scrutiny pre-decision to improve quality of decision making. Every year, we're required to self-assess and report to audits and governments on our financial management arrangements, as well as the part of the external audit to complete the annual governance report. So considering the above and the new project management report, we are happy that there are sufficient information, scrutiny and assurance provided by our enhanced reputations.
1 minute, Councillor Shreve.
Just perfect. Finally, project accounting as proposed by this motion is not widely used within the public sector and may be an industry standard in the private sector. And there would be a big financial impact beyond the cost. It wouldn't just be finance officer who would need to be trained. It would effectively be all support officers, finance, project managers, etc. It would take a fair amount of time to implement, during which time on the implementation of such major systems, as Councillor Henderson knows from his own experience, information takes a backward step and information would be lost. In closing, Mr. Mayor, I hope members take this information into account and feel able to reject this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shreve. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the rationale behind bringing the motion and actually have some sympathy around the aim of keeping residents informed of project delivery. However, I think, Mr. Mayor, that one of the important questions we need to ask is whether project accounting is suitable for and necessary as part of local government across the board for every project. Whilst the Local Government Association recognised project accounting as a key aspect of finance for transformation, is it essential for all projects and particularly an elected member's suite of training needs? This feels almost like a vote of no confidence in the finance team of our council. From my knowledge of project accounting, which to be granted is fairly limited, it is a management system geared towards tracking and reporting and subsequently analysing the results at the conclusion of particular projects. It also involves, when applied to local government transformation projects, only a knowledge, local government transformation projects only, a knowledge of public finance regulations, a knowledge of the council's constitution, Councillor Patrick, and the scheme of delegation, as well as understanding the delivery costs, understanding the inflation and wider economic factors that could impact upon cost and funding, and also an understanding of programme management methodologies. I am aware it was generally used within construction, as mentioned earlier, and also mentioned within the motion text, which I also noticed the mover has lifted word for word from the project accounting page of Wikipedia. But I am not sure of its relevance or suitability for all aspects of local government projects, especially member involvement at such an operational level. I see members of the drivers of policy. We decide upon the direction of travel that we want the council to go in. As politicians of various colours and persuasions within this chamber, we will have different ideas and aims for what we see as important for the economic growth and prosperity of our area. Different priorities for where we set the budgets for each service envelope and rightly scrutinise the spending of these budgets once agreed. But as members, we do not need to be operational or involved in operational day-to-day decisions. And I can see that by the implementation of mandatory training and quarterly reporting, to whom I'm not quite sure, as the motion isn't that specific, we are losing sight of our core function. I would believe that many of the things proposed for an action already probably happening, and the current financial reporting to members, whilst not already perfectly timely due to meeting restrictions and data lag, is transparent and generally sufficient for us to make decisions and ask questions on the ongoing projects. I don't need to know the minutiae of everything. That is what we have specialist officers for. I see no value in setting up a select committee until a further consultation on what we already do with regards to overlaps with our current process, and if we as a local authority would benefit from adopting this method of project accounting. I will therefore be unable to support the motion as is, and actually would have welcomed the amendment, which would have given us as members the opportunity to seek more clarification, make a more informed decision regarding the future of project management within our council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stuart Swinburne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it quite difficult here because I find myself, I'm supporting Councillor Morland. You know, and it's one of those nights, isn't it? You know, where we seem to be supporting each other across these sort of things. But I do believe you've got a lot more experience than you're saying, Councillor Morland, anyway. But further to the motion in front of us, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Councillor Henderson actually said in this first part of his speech that this is an industry-wide approach. Maybe it is an industry-wide approach, but I don't believe that it's a local authority approach. And I would challenge Councillor Henderson to let us know how many other local authorities have taken this approach. These projects, Mr. Mayor, are all operational. And as Councillor Holland has related to early on, we as councillors now have enough work on as it is. And to suggest that we as councillors should take on the role as project accountant, project manager, with even more training is asking too much. I mean, how long training do we need to end up with a professional role of project manager or project accountant? It will never happen, would it? Even with how many training you have. Mr. Mayor, this is why we have experienced officers to advise on all these major projects. And I am not an experienced in fulfilling the roles that this notice of motion is requesting. And I would also challenge Councillor Henderson and Councillor Holland to say that the role of councillor would fill the role of project management. Mr. Mayor, I cannot support this motion that is not part of councillors' remit as councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I can certainly see the validity and the strength of training and support in all matters financial for this authority as a multi-million-pound organisation. And on a side note, if I'm being perfectly honest, some 9 years ago when I was appointed as the portfolio finance this council, perhaps I could have done with a little bit more training up to that point, but I'm very pleased to say the external auditor never had a bad word to say about anything that happened during those particular years. And I did take on subsequent training, so I must have been doing something absolutely right. Now, like many members of this council, I sometimes get frustrated when we have budget debates and discussions, budget scrutiny, and we're trying to talk about very big, very complex strategic financial matters, and the operational questions do kick in, ward questions kick in, and we do seem to struggle sometimes as a council to actually stay on those financial matters. And I would certainly support more training to enable members. And when we do have that voluntary training, it's not always well attended as we might like it to actually be. So that's why I had a lot of hope for the amendments that Councillor Shutt had actually put forward for this proposal, because I think sometimes it's baby steps. You've got to encourage members, and the training and approach we actually take has got to be tailored around us. That's why I think it's only fair and appropriate, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to propose an amendment to the motion put before us tonight that at the top of the paragraph, the following 6 specific actions are proposed for inaction by this council, are proposed for recommendation by this council instead of inaction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Manager Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, Councillor Patrick, but at the risk of repeating myself, Standing Order 13.6 is quite explicit that in a notice of motion, if there's to be an amendment, it has to be on notice the day of the meeting in writing.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask the monitoring officer to actually read out 13.6 amendments on notice, item B, if you could read the paragraph in its entirety. Could I ask him for particular emphasis on the last sentence of the paragraph, please?
Monitoring Officer.
Thank you. One moment, Councillor. In the interest of openness, the standing orders does state that where an amendment to a motion on notice is proposed, it shall be submitted in writing to the monitoring officer during the day before the day of the council meeting to which it relates. Once agreed as valid by the monitoring officer, any such amendment may be tabled at any point during the debate as agreed with the proposer and seconder of the amendment. Stop. The final paragraph, to which I will add a little emphasis, this does not preclude the moving of an amendment during any debate which arises from the debate itself. Not convinced, Councillor Patrick, that changing the wording of motion and losing enactment to recommend or to delete it arises from the course of the debate. It's coming from yourself and you're proposing an amendment which should be made on notice.
On a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I'm very sure that a previous speaker actually did raise that notion prior to myself, so it is very much part of the debate, and I'm sure you didn't actually rule that part of the discussion out of order.
Monitoring Officer.
A little contrived, Councillor Patrick, I feel. Can we move on, Mr.
Councillor Clough. Councillor Holland.
Yes, a point of order. We hear the proposal for the amendment, and I actually tend to agree here with this proposal because we have been in previous debates, and I myself put forward during the debate an amendment. If members remember, it was on the transport plan, and I think it was called the silliest amendment that somebody had ever heard, if my memory serves me correctly. But actually, having discussed them as with Councillor Henderson, we're prepared to accept that amendment.
Moving forward with the debate.
In the interest of expediency, members, if the proposer and the seconder are happy to accept the amendment that enactment is moved to recommend, despite the fact that the motion is still live and has been formally proposed and seconded and is subject to a live debate, unless there's any objection from the floor, my hands appear to be tied.
Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do oppose that because obviously I believe that this is setting a precedent, you know, for future council meetings and when we have this sort of debate again.
Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Mayor, you've already overruled the Constitution today, and I think you should overrule if it is a constitutional issue, you should overrule it again. However, I do not believe it is a constitutional issue. Councillor Shreve introduced to the debate the costs of what this might happen if this is gone through. Said there could be substantial costs. Therefore, without any costs being discussed tonight, actual costs, how can we make a decision that would affect the budget? So therefore, from the debate, we need a clause to investigate this to make sure we can actually go ahead with it due to costs that Councillor Shreve mentioned. And that line in the Constitution is exactly for this moment. That when the debate opens up, we might want to change what we do and the outcome of it. We might want to support it. We might not want to support it in that particular way because of that introduction of a debate. So therefore, I would suggest that the point of order, saying that we recommend, is in order, and the monitoring officer ought to reconsider. And if he doesn't reconsider, then you should overrule, like you did earlier on with Councillor Shreve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Monitoring officer, do you want to come in?
I think before we get into any real constitutional debate around the minutiae and the dusty and cobwebbed corners of the Constitution, we just allow the amendment to go ahead and deem that the word enactment is shifted to recommend. Everyone, thank you.
Move forward with the amendment. We will do. Councillor Clough. I don't know who's first. You both your hands. Councillor Wilson then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I'll be talking on the amendment then. Obviously, the amendment is seeking, I believe, I'm not going to speak with Councillor Patrick, but seeking the time to actually investigate whether this will fit in with local government finances. It needs to be costed. The training needs to be costed. Any systems need to be costed. And it may well be a way forward where we have more confidence in project management for the council. So I would, under those circumstances, I will actually support the amendment to give us that time and that time to consider all the strands of work that need to be done to be able to put this forward for consideration of this council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Before I call any further speakers, we're getting very close to the witching hour we are of 10 o'clock. I move a suspension of standing order. Have I got a seconder? Second. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, members. Councillor Clough.
Sorry, members, just to be clear, members are now talking to the agreed amendment proposed by Councillor Patrick, seconded by Councillor Wilson, that the word enactment be replaced by recommend.
Do you want to speak to the amendment, Councillor Clough? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for your feedback and comments on the paper that we put together. And thanks very much for the very welcome amendment and for giving me the wisdom of your experience. I massively appreciate that. I think just the real point about having some more time to chew this over on a wider base, I think is really well made. And I think that I just wanted to reassure members that I have consulted with officers in putting this paper together. So officers in finance, and in operations. So this isn't something that's been sort of dreamt up in a dark room by myself and Councillor Holland. We have done a little bit of preparatory work for it, and it'd be good to have some time to just discuss that on a much more wider basis across different offices and get your input. So thank you very much.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this probably shows why we need a constitutional working group to actually sort out this bit of the constitution. But anyway, that's an aside. I'm rising to speak not only against enacting this, but even recommending it. I think this whole concept is completely flawed for the reasons that Councillor Morland very clearly set out. I'm agreeing with Councillor Morland tonight, and other members of the Labour group who spoke against it, and my colleague as well, of course, Councillor Shreve, who I think clearly set out the arguments against it. This is a very operational motion, to say the least, and it's in effect advocating that elected members almost take on the role of officers, and that's not what we're here to do. And we had a discussion earlier about how much time elected members spend doing things. I could see us spending a heck of a lot more time scrutinising finances if we were to take on this. As councillors, we should be setting the strategy and then holding officers to account in deciding how they deliver the strategy that we've set and the things that we want them to achieve. And I think, I have to say, I think Councillor Henderson is very clearly not taking advantage of all the opportunities that are currently available within the Constitution for scrutinising projects and their delivery. And this is a common problem. He clearly hasn't looked through the Constitution to see all the areas where he could get involved. And one that he quoted, which was absolute garbage, quite frankly, was his assessment of Freshney Place. And I suspect that's just because I can remember 2 years ago, before I was elected, and he wrote an open letter to me and asked questions in full council here. He was vehemently opposed to the council purchasing Freshney Place. So I suspect he's still peddling that viewpoint in what he's saying here tonight. And then he went on to say, with regard to projects in general, and I quote, "It's next to impossible to see the picture and on all projects." Well, you know, quite frankly, as an elected member, you've got a right to go in and talk to the finance team and actually sit down with them and go through some of this stuff. You know, and I take it you've not done that, because that is an option that is open to elected members. You wouldn't be able to go through it in public because a lot of it is confidential commercial information potentially, but there's no reason why you can't go and see officers and ask on a one-to-one basis to go through some of this stuff in more detail. And does Councillor Henderson really naively believe that just by implementing a new sort of management, a new project management system, that the public is going to have a huge amount more confidence in what we're doing, when we've got so many people out there on social media going into conspiracy theory overdrive all the time about what this council is doing? And Councillor Henderson knows the people I'm talking about. That's what's actually undermining what this council does, not the fact that one or two projects overspend or go over time. And, you know, if he thinks that media organs like GI Media are going to take any notice of this new system he wants to put in place, I think he's just naive. And I know this isn't strictly speaking to do with what we're talking about tonight, but since Councillor Henderson mentioned it, this article that is currently in GI Media with myself and the chief executive photographed saying who is in charge, that has got absolutely nothing to do with project management. It's to do with the current conspiracy theories that are going around as to why the maze was taken out in the gardens in Cleethorpes. And quite frankly, GI Media has gone into an absolute conspiracy theory overdrive on this one. And they've actually asked for statements from me on this, but because they don't like what I've said, they don't subsequently publish it. So that's got absolutely nothing to do with this particular matter, Mr. Mayor. And I think it's absolutely scandalous that Councillor Henderson has raised that in a meeting like this, talking about projects when it's got absolutely nothing to do with projects. And I will be on to GI Media tomorrow to try and set the record straight over this maze, because quite frankly, I'm absolutely sick to death of what they're trying to do with the council over that particular issue. I don't know why GI Media would think we deliberately want to kill nesting birds, but that seems to be the implication they're putting over. Anyway, you've got me really wound up now, Mr. Mayor. But anyway, on that basis, I think that
members be quiet, please.
I think that you know, we, as Councillor Shreve quite rightly said, we have a lot of measures already in place. Councillor Henderson needs to go away and look at the Constitution and look at what is available at the moment for scrutinising projects and the improved systems that Councillor Shreve outlined that we're intending to introduce. And I think you know, for us to be wasting our time as a local authority and wasting officer time on looking at whether or not yet another system being introduced is going to improve project management is a perfect example of why you know, we're struggling with capacity in the officer team. So I will be voting against this, whether he wants to enact it or recommend it or anything else he wants to do with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shutt.
Has there ever been one word changed to a notice of motion that's created so much passion? Go from consultation to recommend. Hey, I didn't think of that one. The important thing, I think, is that most people in the room, apart from a few, feel and sense the passion coming from the people that put the motion forward. Because most of us here feel sometimes on finance, it is a bit of a grey area. It could be clearer. There could be easier ways of understanding the detailed financial report. I've always said that. I'm not sure if, as I said, I'm no expert on project accounting, but there might be some extrapolation from the officers who have a look at it and find something that can help us, because we need help. We do really, really need help. And I'll say I need help. I'm no finance person, even though I do look after the accounts at home. But so all I'm saying, I understand the objections perhaps because we don't realise the consequences, Mr. Mayor, of these actions on cost to fight to training and etc. what some members have spoke about. But I do feel if we can pursue it and find something, some nugget, some moment where someone goes, well, actually, yeah, we could use that. And that helps everyone in this room in scrutiny on finance. I think tonight's efforts and passions would be worth it. Thank you.
Councillor Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My original question has already been answered, but what we need to get to is fact over opinion. Councillor Jackson has said there's lots of opinions going about and whatnot, but what we need to do is to get the facts straight, people. People are going to come up to us if this goes ahead. They're wanting the straight facts, and if we misquote what's happening, it's us what are going to be in danger and jeopardy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Clough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my first time of speaking, so I'll probably say something wrong, but I haven't got anything angry to say. Just a concern that around the room we're a collective of people who were elected by residents. We all have different backgrounds, upbringings, professions, and I think it's very easy to lean into what you know, what you're very, very good at. But I think if we all put those restraints on all of us, and we all had to have mandatory training in accountancy, teaching, health, we would become a room full of jargon. We would become the absolute opposite of what people want to see from a ward councillor, which is someone that they can look at and recognise as a person that they can relate to. We need to find other ward councillors, and we're going to find them in our communities doing community work. We're not going to find them always sat behind an accountancy desk or in a school, and we shouldn't, because that doesn't represent all of the people that we represent, and that's my concern. If we keep leaning into what we understand best and want everyone to come there with us, we can use it bit by bit with each other to work collaboratively, but we can't be mandatory training people in all areas of expertise. That's what I think.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I rise to support the motion. What Councillor Shutt said.
Councillor, forgive me. We're now speaking on the amendment.
Sorry, on the amendment, yes. My apologies. What Councillor Shutt said, that we should investigate further. Nobody's happy with our project delivery. You know, we've Corporation Bridges, the example, it's over budget. We don't know what additional funding we might need, where that's going to come from. We've got two big projects coming up in Pier Gardens and Cleethorpes Marketplace, and we need to make sure that those don't go astray as well. So anything that we can do with regard to project oversight and project controls is worth investigating. So I support the amendment.
Any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Holland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this, as Councillor Henderson said, this hasn't been put together in isolation, and obviously, you know, we talk to council officers and we go into those meetings on the clear understanding that we don't break the confidences of what officers tell us. And I've had meetings with council officers, particularly on Corporation Bridge, looking at the project management, and I've had some hard questions to ask them. I was Marine Operations Lead on a $5 billion project with a burn rate of $5 million a day. Person responsible for a budget of $60 million. Personally accountable for every dollar. So I know what good project management looks like. And Corporation Bridge project management in its early days was, how can I describe it? A complete fiasco. Yeah. Completely below the standard where it should be in terms of project management at the outset. And we're going back now. Things look as though they're getting much better, I'm very pleased to say. But I have had meetings with council officers. And this is born out of frustration because the public do not have confidences to manage finance. And I don't think that belongs, you know, it's not just about conspiracy theories. You know, the public aren't stupid. You know, and some of this just goes right the way back to the Icelandic bank scandal. And often we as members, we hold each other accountable. How often have I sat here or stood here and heard members accusing each other of incompetence? You messed up the plastic palm tree. That was your fault. What about you lot and the Riverhead debacle? So we hold each other accountable for that, and the public picks up on that. They see that, it's reported what we accuse each other of. And if we're accusing each other of it, why shouldn't the public accuse us as members of those fiascos? They've every right to, have they not? So what we're trying to do, and I hear all the criticism and take it all on board, but this is born out of frustration. And Councillor, this is not from political ideology or anything like that. Councillor Henderson and myself, we're on completely opposite sides of the political fence. But this is based on our own experience and to some extent expertise, and it's not in isolation. So, you know, if we're already doing this, great, let's formalise it. If we're not, let's look at it. Because, you know, and members will have probably seen, and the leader alluded to it earlier, the open letter from the Deputy Prime Minister to all council leaders talking about the direction of travel. She's talking about a devolution revolution. Those are her words. No more deal-based approaches. She's talking about integrated packages. So it's even more vital that whatever money we get, that we spend wisely. And that financial pressure is going to increase. And I can see council taxes increasing way above the levels that we've seen because there's no money. And there's so much more the government's going to need to spend money on. And that's going to put us in real trouble, I think, with the residents if they see projects going over budget and they don't have the confidence in us to deliver. And I'll give you an example of where I think things are going wrong. 4 weeks ago, I asked for a copy of the asset management plan for Corporation Bridge. Grade 2 listed structure, one of our most iconic landmarks. I expected to get it within a couple of hours. 4 weeks on, I'm still waiting for it, which makes me believe that there isn't an asset management plan for Corporation Bridge. And so who are residents going to hold to account for that? Are they going to look to officers, or are they going to say, well, you're the elected members. After all these years, why haven't you made sure that that was in place? So we do have an operational obligation. And I know it's a grey area. What is operation? What is strategy? But at the end of the day, residents are going to hold us to account. Yeah. And we've got more projects coming. We need to make sure those are delivered on time, within
1 minute, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. So I accept the amendment fully in terms of, yeah, we need more consultation probably. And yet let's involve officers openly, not in meetings, to establish that this is the way forward. We need every tool in our armoury moving forward, or every weapon in our armoury moving forward. And this is rapidly becoming an industry approach. And government now is talking about mission-based projects. Yeah, where this is going to become the standard. It will become the standard. No question in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mill.
Mr. Mayor, can I propose that we move to the vote on this?
Do we have a second, first of all? Councillor Brooke? All those in favour of that motion? No, the vote be put.
Can members indicate clearly, please? Thank you.
All those against?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the vote is 17 for, 18 against. Debate continues.
Debate continues. Councillor Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a BBC, I rise by the way to speak in favour of the amendment. There was a BBC survey today that was asking councils about financing, and 50% of the councils that responded said that they thought they would be in financial difficulties in the next 5 years. Now, that tells me that we've got to do things differently. We've got to change the way we do things. Our project management as local councils is not brilliant. Whether we are looking at big projects like the Corporation Road Bridge or small projects like the maze removal at Cleethorpes, we are not good at projects. So we need to do things differently. The fact that we don't use this project management approach at the moment, and that is not used by councils, isn't an argument not to use it. And I commend Councillor Henderson for his proposals, because I think they're sensible. And the fact that the amendment is going to look at how we implement those and consult on those, I think is a fair compromise. I think the residents of North East Lincolnshire deserve better, and we need to make sure that we spend their money sensibly and get value for money. So I support the amendment, and I congratulate Councillor Henderson on the initial proposal.
Councillor Morland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was an article, there was an item on the news tonight saying this that North East Lincolnshire is one of the worst places for females to be living. That's far more important to me than, yes, it's on my phone, BBC News tonight. It's one of the worst places for females to live. And what's important to me here is I do understand why Councillor Holland has made the recommendation, but the fact that he hasn't received a report in 4 weeks is down to lack of the present administration and officers not putting that together, rather than overloading us with even more management projects. So it's an error between the officers and the present administration why there's no plan. And the other thing is that we've got to remember that one member of the public said to me today, what are you doing about the fire service? And I said, we're doing nothing about the fire service, because the Home Office runs a fire service, not the local authority. What I'm trying to get at is the public don't always know what is run by a local government and what isn't. And what I was doing while Councillor Holland was speaking was looking at, beyond the fire service, was looking at exactly what we do get involved with. Finance, police, housing, teaching, planning, health, highways, road building, social services, children's services. Why don't we all become experts in all of that? We can't be. So for me, it seems to me that with this motion tonight, we're expecting people to have knowledge on everything. It is impossible. I go back to what I said before. And that is quite simply, we are representatives and we are strategists, not operationalists. It's for the strategists, the existing administration, to get the officers, if that is the case that's needed, to get reports together. So instead of loading extra work onto the officers, and I have no problem with the public knowing how much things cost, by the way, we should know that. We should have some idea. But do we need project management for everything this council does, from laying and removing flagstones in front of someone's house and say, well, why did they get that done and I didn't? Well, it was a health and safety issue. It needed to be done. Well, what was the cost benefit analysis? Well, the cost benefit analysis was the cost was X amount of pounds and the benefit was you're not going to trip over. That's the benefit. You can't have everything down to finances. For goodness sake, can't we grow up? Can't we be realistic? Can't we actually represent the people of this community sensibly instead of giving ourselves and locking ourselves into further administrative tasks? I will not be supporting this motion. I am not against the theory behind it, but I'm against the practicality.
You're speaking on the amendment.
Yeah, I know. And it's the amendment I will not be supporting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Crikey. I think we should get together, myself and Councillor Morland, because obviously the passion he's showing there is absolutely fantastic. But, you know, taking to listen to what Councillor Holland has been saying, over the last couple of years with Corporation Road Bridges being very vocal on what's been happening, is he advocating then that if we had a council, you know, project manager, a councillor as a project accountant, that we would have overseen these problems that occur? You know, that's understandable, you know, that we've had these problems that's been out of our control. But Councillor Holland, in his wisdom, most probably would think, no, I could have done better. I would have had that bridge done, repaired and opened, you know, without all this, if we had a councillor representing us as a council project manager or a council project accountant. You know, these things are out of our control, Councillor Holland, at times, and it doesn't matter how much you put in place. We have to rely on the advice of professional people and professional officers. And if we didn't, then we would be in a far worse state than what we are now. So I agree with Councillor Morland there. Let's just get on with the reality of things now and get on with what's needed for the best for this community.
Any further speakers?
Personal explanation.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to sum up of that, because I've been, I think, misquoted there or misjudged. What I'm not saying is that I'm going to go and manage it, but what I'm saying is when you come from an experienced background in this and you see it going wrong, and then you look at the actual process and the management process behind it, and you can see that that's wrong, that's when I have a problem. If I could see that the project management was in place, that was managing that thing properly, fine. But when I know that there's no actual project manager looking after that on a day-to-day basis, right back at the early stages, then my professional experience says to me, we're wasting council time.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. This has gone beyond a point of personal explanation.
I think you're right there, Councillor Jackson. Let's move on. Any further speakers on the amendment? No. So let's vote on the amendment now. A recorded vote.
So members, it is a formality that we go through a recorded vote for an amendment. This is the amendment proposed by Councillor Patrick, seconded by Councillor Wilson, to change the wording of the substantive motion as put out in the agenda, to change the word enactment to recommend. I'll read the names of you all in alphabetical order. There are 3 responses. If you're for, it's for, against, or abstain. Councillor Aisthorpe. Councillor Augusta. Councillor Bassam, Mr. Mayor.
Against.
Councillor Bonner. Councillor Boyd. Yes. Councillor Bright. Councillor Brooks. Yes. Councillor Clough. Councillor Crofts. Yes. Councillor Dawkins. Yes. Councillor Downs. Councillor Emerson. Councillor Farron. Councillor Goodwin, Madam Deputy Mayor.
For.
Councillor Haggis. Councillor Harness. Councillor Hasthorpe. Councillor Henderson. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Humphrey. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Kasmarek. Councillor Mill. Councillor Morland. Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Pettigrew. Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Shreve. Councillor Shutt. Councillor Sylvester. Councillor Swinburne K. Councillor Swinburne S. Councillor Wheatley. Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, all those for, 18, all those against, 19. The amendment fails. We now revert back to the substantive motion as laid out in the agenda.
Any further speakers on the substantive motion? I'm looking round. I can't see any. Councillor Holland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did reserve the right to speak. So all I would say is this motion on notice comes with the best of intentions. It is designed so that we can say to the public, look, we know that things have gone wrong in the past. We know that projects have not been managed properly, and we understand that you don't have confidence in us. This is what we're doing to put it right. And we're looking around at the best tools there are to do this. And as I say, this hasn't been done in isolation. We have talked to council officers. So it's not going to go away. This will not go away in terms of our project management. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, as things come to the fore, and those members that attended Transport and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel on Tuesday night will know exactly what I'm talking about, then I think the confidence levels are going to drop further. This was an opportunity, actually, to preempt that drop in confidence. And let me just address what Councillor Swinburne said there. I'm not so arrogant to think that I could take charge of the bridge and do it in record time. It's had decades of neglect, partly because there's been no plan in place. But it's up to us as members, I think, to make sure those sorts of plans are in place. That's just pure strategy and checking with officers. Is there a plan to look after that asset? And just making sure that all these things are in place. That's our duty as members. And when, you know, I see that some of the dishonesty put out by the council, I have to say, some of those communications put out about Corporation Bridge in February of 23, the council saying it'd be finished by Christmas and leading to that expectation without having a clue whether that was deliverable or not. Not a clue. Is, as far as I'm concerned, it affects the reputation of me as a councillor, because residents say to me, Steve, what about that? Did you know that was happening? And I've had people at high levels in the construction industry sending me emails, giving me their thoughts. People in the nuclear industry saying, what is going on with this council? So this is not sort of conspiracy rumours on the internet. These are people with a huge amount of experience understanding that that wasn't right. Yes, we're starting to see now things put in place. But, you know, when I took it to scrutiny for a deep dive into what was going on, that was rejected by scrutiny. So, you know, you think sometimes, what do you have to do to raise red flags? And I've raised plenty of red flags in I won't say secret meetings, but in confidential meetings with council officers. So this will not go away. Money's going to be tighter. And in terms of, yeah, you know, money to deliver on other stuff, safety, women and girls. If we overspend in one area, that's less money to spend in other areas. And that's where we're going to be, and it's not going to get any easier. So yeah, I can say that the general mood in the room is against this motion on notice. But Councillor Henderson and myself, we will continue to have discussions with council officers and pose to them, look, why did we do it this way? Why did we do it that way? Have you thought about this? And at least come up with some positive, constructive ideas as to how things can improve.
Councillor Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what we haven't addressed is this viable now? Given the period of time and change, we're moving from Equans to in-house, and most of these projects have come under Equans. So let's see how these systems improve first under in-house with the council, then bring this motion back to full council to see if there's big improvements. Thank you.
Any further speakers on the substantive motion? Councillor Henderson to reply.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for a very lively debate. I'll try and pick the bones out of it. I think that in terms of some of the comments that we've heard tonight, I think it's important to focus on what was said rather than the tone that was used. So I'll rise above that. But there are a number of things that were raised just now. I think that nobody's any desire to manage officers' business. I don't want to be a project manager. None of us want to be a project manager. We've all got other things to do. But it is incumbent on us, as we represent our residents, to be able to have a conversation with officers that enables us to hold them to account and also enables us to set strategy. Somebody mentioned that it's important we have that strategic role. How can we set strategy for a master plan for an area with a huge investment without having the skills to have a detailed conversation with officers to enable them to discharge the strategy that we set for them? This isn't about us being qualified accountants. This is about us having kind of conversational French. It's about us having enough of an understanding to have a conversation with officers in the right way and represent our public. I think the notion that we would do this without consulting with officers in advance is frankly absurd and insulting. And Councillor Holland has already spoken about the consultation that we did in putting this together. We were going to table this back before the election, but we held it back. It's been in consultation for about 6 months. So this is a well thought through piece. Somebody made the comment that this isn't common standard in private sector, but not common standard in the public sector. And somebody else very helpfully pointed out the Local Government Association recommend this as a standard for transformation projects. We sold a big plot of land to fund transformation projects. So we've got transformation projects on the go and we should be able to do them properly. And we as members should be able to have a decent conversation with officers about that. Already exists. That baffled me a little bit. There's this point that that Councillor Henderson doesn't know. Well, I kind of make it my business to know, and I attend more scrutiny committees than those panels that I'm just on. And there's a consistent thread here. I was a bit baffled by Councillor Shreve saying, we've got this new report that's coming out, but we've already got the information. If we've already got the information, why do we need the new report? It kind of didn't seem to stack up. But I welcome the moves to bring project management back in-house and to try and professionalise the discipline using some of the great professional skills that some of our fantastic officers have got. But this doesn't go away from the fundamental point that there's a lack of trust in residents, in us as members. There's a lack of trust that we have grip over the work that our officers do on our behalf. This isn't extra work. Somebody mentioned this was a huge piece of work. This is basic project governance that you would expect on material projects in any industry. This should be like oxygen to project managers who are running these biggest capital projects of ours. They shouldn't need to do anything special to satisfy the needs of members. They should just be sharing the stuff that they do on a day-to-day basis to grip the projects that they're in charge of managing. So I think between the points about this is not about operational management, it's about having a strategic framework It's about us being equipped to have a decent conversation with officers without doing their job for them. It's about following best practice. It's about recognising the risk that we've got on the projects that we face at the moment. But I do want to come back to the point that Councillor Holland started with, when he said this is done with the best of intent. You might remember when we started this discussion a while ago, I started by talking about what an exciting time this is for us all. We're entering a period of unprecedented investment and opportunity for the people who live in our district. We are in for a really great new era, pump primed by lots of money. We better not make a mess of it. And the proposal that I put together was one way that we could maybe work together to do our part as members, support officers, make sure these projects are great, make sure they're delivered, make sure we justify our role to our residents, and make sure we get a return on our investment. That's more than just about cash releasing savings, by the way. It's about benefits. It's about delivering a market improvement.
Councillor Henderson.
It's about delivering social value to people who live in our area. It's more than just pounds, shillings and pence. It's about making this area a fantastic place to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In accordance with the Constitution, I will now take a recorded vote on the substantive motion. Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, again, you'll be familiar with the process. The responses are for, against or abstain. You're now voting on the substantive motion proposed by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Holland, as laid out in the agenda papers. Councillor Aisthorpe. Councillor Augusta. Yes. Councillor Besant, Mr. Mayor.
Against.
Councillor Bonner. Councillor Boyd. Yes. Councillor Bright. Councillor Brooks. Yes. Councillor Clough. Councillor Crofts. Councillor Dawkins. Yes. Councillor Downs. Councillor Emerson. Councillor Farron. Councillor Goodwin, Madam Deputy Mayor. Oh. Councillor Haggis. Yes. Councillor Harness. Yes. Councillor Hasthorpe. Yes. Councillor Henderson. Oh. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hudson. Yes. Councillor Humphrey. Yes. Councillor Jackson. Yes. Councillor Jarvis. Beg your pardon, Councillor. Councillor Casmon. Yes. Councillor Mill. Yes. Councillor Morland. Yes. Councillor Parkinson. Yes. Councillor Patrick. Yes. Councillor Pettigrew. Yes. Councillor Shepherd. Yes. Councillor Shreve. Yes. Councillor Shutt. Yes. Councillor Sylvester. Yes. Councillor Swinburne K. Councillor Swinburne S. Yes. Councillor Wheatley. Councillor Wilson. Yes. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Elected members, the result of the recorded vote, 4, 6, against 29, abstentions 2. The motion is unsuccessful. Thank you.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Agenda item 15, questions on notice. 5 questions on notice have been submitted for this meeting. The expectation is that members will ask the questions as given on notice. The asking of any supplementary question is limited to 1 minute only and must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Councillor Bonner, please would you put your question, which is to the portfolio holder for housing, infrastructure and transport.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. See, it's a while since I did this, so I hope I can remember how to do it properly. The most recent housing needs assessment for North East Lincolnshire states that over the next 5 years, there's a predominant requirement for affordable housing in order to meet the majority of affordable housing needs in North East Lincolnshire. The most strategic housing market
Most recent strategic housing market assessment identified a net affordable housing need of at least 586 houses per
Councillor
annum.
Bonner, please, can you please read the question as laid out?
I thought that was what was written down. Okay. The most recent strategic housing market assessment of 2013 of housing needs for North East Lincolnshire states that the main priority is for social housing and affordable housing for rent in order to meet the majority of affordable housing needs. The net affordable housing requirement of at least 586 dwellings per annum over a 5-year period to clear the existing backlog of houses in need, households in need, and meet future household need. The loss of 966 properties since 2013-14 has increased the shortage of affordable housing, resulting in an estimated 1,295 households in need of accommodation. Recent sales of land for housing have not included any provision for social housing or low-cost rented properties, and as a result of the shortage of accommodation for people with low income, thousands of residents in North East Lincolnshire are forced to live in unsuitable accommodation and substandard housing. How is North East Lincolnshire Council responding to the need for affordable homes for people who are currently forced to live in substandard accommodation or those who do not have a home of their own?
Councillor Swinburne, will you please reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bonner, for your question. It is a question related to affordable and social housing provision within North East Links, but first of all, let me just confirm, and I think Councillor Bonner already knows this, that NELC is not a housing authority. Social housing provision, although very important to our area's housing needs, sits with our partners, LHP. NELC works very closely with LHP and other social housing associations to encourage them to expand our social housing footprints throughout the area. And one good example of this working with LHP, they plan now to deliver a new social housing development in Immingham. The council is also working on improving the viability of numerous brownfield sites within the urbanised areas of North East Lincolnshire, working to overcome challenges with a Section 106 process. By engaging with Homes England to increase opportunities for developers on land that has traditionally been considered undevelopable. An example of this is Garth Lane. In terms of affordability and housing both through our own land sales and other land acquisition, the Local Plan Policy 18 sets out how the council seeks to address the scale of affordable housing by increasing the provision of affordable homes through the planning system identified in the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. The council requires contribution to be made in accordance with qualifying thresholds and requirements. And I do have, Mr. Mayor, I do have further statistics that, without boring tonight, because there's so many of them, and I will ask the Democratic Services to forward these on to Councillor Bonner after this meeting, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Bonner, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. A recent report from the Building Research Establishment indicates that improving a home, making it healthy and safe, this has long-term implications for the life chances of occupants and visitors.
Councillor Bonner, a question.
Would you agree that a caring council should do everything in its power to ensure every resident has a decent home to live in?
Yes. Thank you very much, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Kasmarak, please will you put ask your question which is to the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, With the success of the Königswinter visit and our 50 years of twinning, will the leader of the council share my commitment to supporting, encouraging and promoting a closer and longer lasting exchange of culture and friendship with Königswinter?
Councillor Jackson, will you please reply?
Thank you for your question, and the answer is yes.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Casmeret?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick, please would you put your first question, which is to Portfolio Holder for Finance, Resources and Assets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will. After the recent occupation of Wheelsby Woods by a group of travellers and the aftermath of waste that was found following their departure, does the portfolio holder feel that the policy of temporary stopover sites is fit for purpose?
Councillor Harness, will you please reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Councillor Patrick for the question. My answer is yes, but we cannot legislate for travellers who give no notice and descend on sites unannounced. After the travellers in Wheelsby Woods refused to engage or discuss a negotiated stopping agreement, legal action was taken as quickly as possible. I'm sure we can all agree that having to use council resources to clear up other people's discarded mess is a sad drain on valuable council services, sometimes inevitable, such as Armed Forces Weekend. Our thanks must go to the Equans operatives who were tasked with such an unpleasant clean-up operation in Wheelsby Woods. We must also thank the Friends of Wheelsby Woods community group for the work that they do. Since the implementation of the NSA agreements, which is 2 years ago, there have been only two groups of travellers, one a group of 8 caravans who left the area very quickly and one a group of caravans staying just one night. There had been no more recorded visits until the recent but significant visit by travellers who set up camp in our very much loved Wheelsby Woods. The Transport, Infrastructure and Strategic Housing Scrutiny Panel is due to review the Gypsy and Traveller Negotiated Agreements policy at their September meeting as per SPE 20 tracking recommendation. This will be an ideal opportunity to receive and discuss a report on the recent experience in Wheelsby Woods, as well as to review the policy itself as per a Cabinet mandate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harness. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask the portfolio holder if he thinks that the event and the subsequent aftermath was an example of the current policy being successful?
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Harness, will you please reply?
Councillor Patrick, could you just repeat the last word then?
Do the whole question, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. Does Councillor Harness feel that the occupation and the subsequent aftermath is an example of the current policy being successful?
Yeah, I thank Councillor Patrick for the supplementary question. I think we've got to remember, whatever policy we have in place, it's always going to be vulnerable to traveller groups turning up. Every tranche of land in our authority, be it public or private, is vulnerable to travellers turning up, putting up an encampment, and then obviously it leads to legal action. Whatever policy we put in place, what we have to remember is that since I remember going back to the days of negotiating when we were looking at designated stopover land, etc. Since those days, the number of visits by travellers has reduced dramatically, so that in the last 2 years we've had just the one significant encampment, which is in Wheelsby Woods, which occurred in the last couple of weeks or so.
Thank you for your reply, Councillor Harness. Councillor Patrick, please would you put your second question, which is to the portfolio holder for Housing, Infrastructure and Transport.
I will indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder share my view that all planning applications should be judged on their own merits within planning policy framework and community benefit, and free from the considerations of vested interest and familiarity?
Councillor Swinburne, will you please reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Patrick, for your question. I do share your view that planning applications should be judged on their own merits, and so the answer to your question is yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Patrick, have you a supplementary?
I do indeed, Mr. Mayor. Would the portfolio care to speculate why it is that so many members of the public aren't entirely convinced that at last week's planning meeting, those particular values?
I refuse to answer
at
that
all
question,
times?
Mr. Mayor. I refuse to answer that question straight out. And I think the monitor officer should say something about that as well.
On a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I think the Constitution obliges the member to
Please
answer.
sit down. Monitor officer.
Thank you. I'm not sure I heard the full question, Councillor Patrick. For consideration, please, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, would the portfolio care to speculate why some members of the public are not entirely convinced that these values were actually being followed at the planning committee meeting necessarily last week at all times?
Monitoring officer.
Not sure how Councillor Swinburne can answer regarding speculation of the public, but I think Councillor Swinburne, if you could give a brief answer, would be helpful.
Councillor Swinburne.
I don't believe I can answer that question, as you rightly said, the monitor officer. So, Mr. Mayor, I can't comment on what's happened with the comments on social media with the public.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Holland, please would you ask your question, which is to the portfolio holder for environment and net zero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2019, North East Lincolnshire Council declared a climate emergency. On the 15th of December 2022, some 18 months ago now, the council committed to faster progress with a view to achieving a net zero carbon impact by the council and their assets by 2030. This council also reaffirmed its commitment to engage with partners, businesses and communities in order to achieve net zero carbon across the borough as proximate as practically possible to the council's own accelerated 2030 aspiration. Despite these urgent council commitments and an 18-month interval, the council website shows that the net zero carbon roadmap is still referencing 2040 as the date for achieving net zero carbon, with a plan and work stream geared around that date. In terms of understanding potential obstacles to achieving the intended 2030 timeframe, could the portfolio holder kindly provide members with the estimated financial cost for the council to achieve net zero carbon impact by 2030?
Councillor Hudson, will you please give your reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Holland, for your question. The date on the website is quite simply an oversight, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, and we will rectify that. As for the predicted cost, there are so many variables when you're dealing with this that it's impossible to have predicted costs. We don't know what technologies can become available in the future. We don't know if this new government will be quite as generous as the previous government with grant funding. So there's a lot to
members, please be quiet.
There's a lot to look at. What I do know is that in our quest for net zero, it's enabled us to successfully bid for millions of pounds of funding. We are currently using that money to replace energy systems that we would otherwise have had to find out of our own finances at some point in the future. So there is a lot of money being spent. Most of it's not being spent by us. And I hope that when we achieve our goals, there will actually be a lot of savings to this authority, because we'll be running more efficient heating systems, more efficient vehicles, and that will have an impact on the overall budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. I hope the portfolio holder will correct me if I misunderstood him here, but I hear him saying that actually we don't have any idea or cost estimates whatsoever. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 16, minutes of Cabinet and the committees of the Council. The minutes of the Cabinet and committees of the Council, as set out in the agenda, have been circulated to members in advance of this meeting. Members are required to submit any questions on these minutes on notice, and the schedule of the questions received has been tabled. The questions shall be taken in the order set out on the schedule. Councillor Farron, will you put your question to the Leader of the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Residents of Douglas Road and surrounding areas who recently submitted a petition are ever more impatient for a solution for the challenges that the HMO in their residential area brings. When the report is released, will the portfolio holder meet with residents and ward councillors of Sydney Sussex to discuss the findings?
Councillor Swinburne, will you please reply?
I believe it was to the Leader, Mr. Mayor, but just adding on to that, as the new portfolio holder, I am willing to meet with Councillor Farron and the residents on that occasion.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. You have a supplementary.
Yes, I do. Can the portfolio holder confirm the date he expects the report to be released?
Councillor Swinburne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, as a new portfolio, I have no idea of that at the moment.
Thank you very much. Leader, please will you move the approval of the minutes of the Cabinet and the committees of the Council as set out in this minute book en bloc?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to move these minutes en bloc as suggested.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I rise to second as suggested.
All those in favour?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, councillors. Councillor Patrick, you indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask for an amendment to the minute book, page 161, under AC 60, audit and governance. The first paragraph, if that could, there could be in addition to that sentence to indicate that this was a formal proposal by myself and seconded by Councillor Holland, which was agreed for by a vote.
There's no objection to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All in favour? Thank you very much, members. Item 17, urgent business. There's no urgent business for this consideration at this meeting. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance, and I now declare the meeting closed.